All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's City Council study session for Monday, August 12th. We have 4 items for tonight, and just a quick word. Member Wright and Mayor Pro Tem both let me know they would not be in attendance tonight. We're going to kick off tonight with Englewood Arts. We have Executive Director Eric Bertoluzzi, as well as Englewood Arts Board Member Jeff Shoemaker, as well as Englewood resident Angela Forster, here to give a mid-year report on Englewood Arts. Good evening. Not sure who's going to be kicking us off, but
Sorry, this is serious. Hi, my name is Angela Forster. Good evening. I am a longtime resident of Englewood, a local business owner. I am also the secretary on the Greater Englewood Chamber of Commerce. Turns out that I'm a parent as well, because if you're going to go big. And my daughter participated in Strings Attached, which I'll talk about in a second. And in terms of audience participation, I've attended many, many concerts at Hampden Hall. So I was invited to present from that position. And this is a 6-month update, and I am the biggest fangirl ever, so I'm a big cheerleader, but I will keep this brief. And tonight I want to share some of the robust programming, the public engagement, and the community connections that's made currently by Englewood Arts over the course of the last 6 months. Quick overview, Englewood Arts was conceived in the year 2000, but became an official 501c3 in 2001, the following year, as a nonprofit organization. Their mission is a pretty direct and simple mission. It's to enrich the life of Englewood community through arts education and performances in dance, music, theater, and the visual arts. The way they achieve this are through 4 major components. First one is educational outreach, spotlight series, their concert series, and lastly, Hampden Hall. And I'll go through each of these briefly throughout my slides. The first one is the educational outreach, and this is how Englewood Arts connects with minors, children, students in Englewood's community specifically. They have 4 programs that they deliver throughout the year: the Strings Attached, the Maddox Kindercare classes, the group violin lessons, and the Symphony Spotlight series, which kind of is both the educational outreach but also their performance connection. So it's a bit of a hybrid in that respect. First up, we have the Strings Attached, which my daughter participated in for a couple of years. Strings Attached are weekly lessons, individual lessons, held in Hampden Hall. They are 30 or 60-minute lesson long in duration. They are currently string-focused: violin, cello, guitar, piano, and voice, which I guess is not really a string. Anyways, and they also will be adding flute lessons in September. Oh, sorry, they're in the new space. The new space is, pardon me, I stand corrected. The lessons will not be in Hampden Hall. They're actually in the new space. It's important to understand that tuition, if a parent were to pay for private lessons, a half hour on the street market is about $40 to $60 for half an hour. And what Englewood Arts does is charge the parent $14 per half hour lesson, and fundraises and goes for scholarships and endowments to cover the rest of that, so that a musician teaching those lessons is given a more decent wage, and families in Englewood can have an affordable private lesson experience. These are just a couple inches. What they do initially is typically go into schools in the Englewood community, Englewood Public Schools, bring a few musicians and bring out some instruments, and then they try to drum up interest within that. And the goal is putting instruments into kids' hands and moving them to a one-on-one lesson strictly for exposure. And that exposure helps to develop the brain: math, literacy, memory, concentration, language development. Even if these students don't go on professionally, these skills are skills of a lifetime. Just like many parents will put their kids into a soccer lesson, Englewood Arts would like those parents to also consider a private lesson and make it affordable for families. In 6 months alone, this blows me away, they have under their belt 950 lessons in the MOA space, the former MOA space. That does not include additional lessons off-site. That's just on this location, just to give a sense of scale. I don't even want to be around kids that many hours, and here they have single-handedly connected with that many community members. Another part of their educational outreach is an Englewood school program at the preschool level, at the Maddox Kinder classes. Song, dance, movement, counting, numbers, whole body, whole child approach to experiencing and learning music at an age when children are a lot less self-conscious, more receptive, and engaged in music just as it comes. These lessons happen at Maddox, which is an Englewood public school, an award-winning early learning center. They are weekly on site. Again, the key is exposure, and the key is to get children to just hold an instrument, play with an instrument, experience music in a way that's accessible, fun, and low stress. Last year, 250 Maddox students participated in these kinder classes that Englewood Arts provided. I didn't realize we had 250 preschoolers, but we do. Third outreach component of Englewood Arts Educational is the group violin lessons. These are happening 3 days a week. Class sizes are 10 students per class. They happen during the regular school schedule. And it's important to understand that these students are provided instruments, materials, maintenance. Music is something you have to buy. They are music rights, they're copywritten. Englewood Arts covers all those fees so that the classes can happen in the school system. So this is a public school program currently in Englewood. Once again, exposure, exposure, exposure. Opportunity, opportunity, opportunity. So for 24 years, since its inception, Englewood Arts has delivered group lessons in a public school setting. The second way that they connect in the community is through their Spotlight series. And this is part of their educational outreach, but it's also very entertaining. So in terms of where does it fall in the rubric, it's a tough one in that respect. It originally was up close and personal, but in 2019, it became Spotlight, Symphony Spotlight. And it's 13 members of a symphony, one musician from each section, performs a small solo and explains why that instrument is fabulous and their favorite and fantastic. And the songs they play are either old standards, new favorites, and it's connecting students to children to the music and what it does. It's way beyond just Peter and the Wolf. It's more contemporary in that respect. These are CSO instrument players, musicians, high quality, high level musicians coming in, and they reach about 1,000 students per year with this program. This program moves to lots of different schools and other locations. Yearly, they're averaging this is 6 months. In 6 months, they performed 24 times this Symphony Spotlight series. It also exists online if a teacher in Englewood wants to use it for their music program. So that's also another opportunity I didn't showcase, but it does exist virtually. Oh, and if I figured out the math since they performed, I think we're averaging 750 concerts since the inception of this form of music education outreach. The next area that Englewood Arts oversees is their concert series. And their concert series is a music experience for the whole community. And they work on that by making cost-effective ticket prices. They do this by also providing 2 o'clock concerts that allow members of the community with nighttime driving concerns access to a facility. They are chamber music forward. They feature local, national, and international artists. What Eric and his team have done superbly is bring in high quality of musicians at their performances. If I were to see these musicians at the CSO, I'd be paying $70 a ticket. And I can see them here for $20 to $35 typically. Every seat is an orchestra street. Parking is free. There's a lot of reasons why this is extremely desirable, and it's right off of light rail. We're currently working with Craig Hospital to connect their community to these concerts, and that's kind of an ongoing project that hopefully can be reviewed at the end of the year. Average attendance, when you look throughout the 6 months, we've had 145 attendance, and I believe the venue holds 200. So that gives you a sense of how well it's occupied. I'm not going to go through all these performances, but just to get a sense of, from January 1st to June 30th, those were the public concerts open to Englewood families. And any student who's taking Englewood Arts Strings Attached program gets free access to these concerts, them and their family member. Moving on. Funding. It's important to understand that the community also funds this concert series. The majority of the funding, and when I show the pie chart, you'll see that the majority of funding is coming from the major contributions from audience participants. which is a really, to me, a brilliant statement that the community is supporting this program. Lastly, Englewood Arts also has the mandate to manage Hampden Hall. And Hampden Hall, when it's not being used by the city for its purposes, is open to community resources, meetings, conferences, performances, cultural groups, neighborhood associations, local societies, nonprofits. It's open, and Englewood Arts manages that space for the city. This gives you a sense of how many community users have rented the space and accessed it in a 6-month period. And I know that this last month they've had already like 4 performances or 4 users. It ranges from anywhere from a cultural group to a video performance artist needing a space that she can make a YouTube video to holiday celebrations, and that's just a tip of the iceberg for how that space gets used. I hate numbers, but these are pretty exciting numbers. This is a 6-month period. And in this period, what you'll note is that the biggest contributions, as I mentioned earlier, come from ticket sales and private donations. And you'll notice also there's a difference between the expense at this point and the profit at this point. And historically speaking, the last 20 years data show that foundations grants come in the fall. And that's money is expected and historically occurred. All these Englewood opportunities are made possible by the generous support of individuals, by the city's presence, allowing us that presence. This shows you some of our ongoing foundations that support Englewood Arts, and the number one, of course, is the city for allowing Hampden Hall and the management of that as well. This is a whole community space, and in the 6 months' time illustration, you guys all received the document. You can see the variety of different people who have accessed it. I just want to give a quick thank you to Englewood Arts, to the City Council, fellow Englewood residents and business owners, and providing the opportunity, but also giving me 10 minutes of time to present Englewood Arts. Thank you very much.
Angela, thank you very much for that overview, speaking like a true parent as well as a true fangirl there. Thank you so much for that. I'll open it up to council for any questions. Any questions at all? I guess I have a couple of questions regarding the lessons that are provided within the elementary schools. You stated that the price is knocked down to, what, $14 per?
Currently it's $14 per half-hour lesson.
So is that something that people have to apply for, or is that the going rate for any family, or do they have to fall under a low-income
That's
bracket?
the standard fee that we request from the students, from their parents.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay. So that's the standard fee for all families. If they want to go ahead and participate, that's something that's available to them.
some of the students have greater reduced fees than that,
Okay.
but all of them pay something.
Okay, perfect. And Mr. Bertoluzzi, I think you may be able to answer this as well. Is this augmenting what is provided by the school district, or is the school district not able to? I'm assuming that these are 30-minute, 60-minute lessons that the school district just isn't able to provide that level of lesson to most students. Is that what Englewood
Yeah,
Arts
to
is
my
providing?
knowledge, the school district has never offered private individual lessons. And years ago, the music programs, instrumental music programs, disappeared in the elementary grades. So most of our students, I'd say 90% of them, are from ages 5 through 12. We have a couple of teenagers, a few of them, but we're hoping that we're providing this opportunity for them to get started, because that's the best time to get started on a musical instrument.
No, I agree. Thank you so much for that. Member Nudenkamp.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. It's wonderful to hear both from the administrative staff as well as community members who are experiencing the benefits of Englewood Arts. I'm curious for either the music lessons or some of the attendees for the concerts. Do you have a sense of how many people who are coming who are Englewood residents versus outside of Englewood, and the mix of that in your class sizes?
Okay, thank you for the question. The reality is that most of the attendees are not Englewood residents, but I don't view that as a negative. Hampton Hall is an attraction for people in Denver, Jefferson County, and other parts of Arapahoe County. We have some people who are regular attendees who are Englewood residents, but most of them are not residents of Englewood.
May I? Greetings, everybody. Jeff Shoemaker, Chair of the Board. The fact that there is a broad-based attendance base speaks to the very value of what this organization is about. It brings people, I'm a Denver native, I'm a lifelong Denver resident. Eric and I recently did a performance on our own on June 8th. There were 160 people there, of which maybe 30% were Englewood residents. Here's the beauty of that. The other 70% came in, witnessed your city, came into your hall, witnessed this amazing place, and celebrated its venue that but for Englewood Arts. That's just one example they would not have known. So for the fact that this is a community-wide opportunity for people to experience this venue in this city is an added benefit.
That's helpful. I appreciate that. And my second question is, do you have a sense of how people hear about the performances, the classes, the opportunities? Do you have any, I don't know if you survey your attendees, how did you hear about us? And are you thinking about any other marketing opportunities to ensure more people are aware of your programming?
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't really hear her.
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Sure. Sorry, sometimes I speak
That's
to the
all
side.
right.
I'm wondering, do you know how people who attend your performances or your classes, how they hear about the programming that you have? Do you survey them, or do you have any other plans so that more people can hear about the programming that you offer?
Right, we don't, I have to admit, we don't spend a lot of money on advertising. We put our money into the actual programs, into the artists. But we have a growing database of attendees, and we send out our notices for each concert. We'll send out a notice in the next few weeks for the 4 fall concerts that we're going to do. And a lot of people who attend get the information word of mouth.
And I'll quickly add, I know your time is precious. Dimitri, one of our board members, is modestly, where are you, man? There you go. Here's how it works. We are our own best advocates. So in addition to the Englewood Arts database, every single member of this board, starting with its chair, sends out individual emails to our respective databases to celebrate the fact that we want whoever you are from whatever part of the community you are to come in and attend. And oh my gosh, if you can attend, support this organization. We are our own best advocates.
And then I'd just like to add, in terms of the school, because that's the one I'm most familiar with, because my daughter learned about Englewood Arts by the engagement directly to parents. So there are overtures to parents, the Friday folder. We're working towards designing some stickers and other ways that parents can hear about it in a way that's very low friction, so that they know that the program exists.
That's great. Thanks so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Member Russell.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. On the school program, do you provide the instruments as well?
Yes, we provide all of the instruments and the maintenance, because the instruments get damaged, they get destroyed. So that's a bit of a necessary. I mean, if we don't provide the instruments, the kids won't be taking the lessons. It's as simple as that. So,
And no cost to the students.
right.
And they're able to keep them to practice on, correct?
Yes, the students, yes, the students in the group lessons don't always get to take the instruments home. But in the individual lessons, absolutely, because they're required to prepare for their lessons.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And at some point, I really would like some financials like we got last year.
Thank you, Member Russell. Did you want to repeat that? Just, you were looking for the financials
Yeah,
that
I was
we,
looking for the
Interesting.
financials like last year for each thing. So I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
thank you, Member Russell. Any further go ahead, Member Ward.
The last time we met with your group, there was some discussion about Hampden Hall and specifically what various groups were getting charged for Hampden Hall. So as we continue to move forward on our regular check-ins and discussions, one of the things that would be helpful for me is seeing specifically how that public space is being used. You've provided the list of events, but I don't know who was charged for what or when. And as part of the contract that was attached to our study session packet tonight, there's a requirement that a schedule be available all the time to the city. So I would appreciate seeing that schedule for the last 6 months, along with what was charged to the various users for their usage. That would be helpful for me.
Okay.
Perfect. Anything else for members of council? If not, Mr. Shoemaker, I'm sorry, go ahead. Member Prangard, is your light not
That's
working
okay.
or?
Thank you for being here this evening and for continuing to provide the program. I have had 2 children come through it, and I understand deeply the value of what the program offers. So appreciate it. I just wanted to build on Member Ward's question. For me, being a newer council member, I have had some questions around the usage of the space, and I saw a list of community partners that rent the space, but I've also had some questions around maybe community partners that are not renting the space and using it for free. And so if I could have some clarity on that, or maybe a follow-up email or however you prefer to get that information to us, that would help me be able to provide answers to the community.
I can answer that in general right now. Most every user pays the fee or a fee. However, there are times when I make the judgment where it's better to give than to receive. So we've allowed a number of the users, community people, organizations to use the room free of charge. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for that. I want to thank you both for what you're bringing to the community. Thank you very much for the partnership. Thank you very much for the partnership with the schools as well, and just bringing a little bit of arts and culture to our city. Really happy with what you guys have brought to our city over the last 20 years or so. So thank you so much.
If I might, I just want to, we haven't had a chance to formally thank you, but Jeff and I and Angela, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for granting us the use of the space, the former MOA space, and for the continued management of Hampden Hall. It means more to us than I or Jeff can express, and I wanted you to know that it's probably unlikely that we would exist if it weren't for your generosity. So maybe Jeff can add to that, but thank you so much, and Sean too for his participation in that.
You ready for Jeff Shoemaker to be brief? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. And thank you very much for the presentation. You have a great evening. Thank you, everyone. All right, we're moving on to agenda item 2. We have Director of Finance Kevin Engels and Budget Manager Jennifer Nolan here to discuss the draft proposal for the 2025 operating and capitals budget. Good evening, Mr. Engels. Good evening, Ms. Nolan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you mentioned, we're going to talk about the proposed 2025 operating and capital budgets this evening. With me is Budget Manager Jenny Nolan, and in the audience, we have department directors to answer any questions that you might have. Here's the agenda for this evening. We'll talk about the budget calendar. We'll look at the general fund overview for 2025. We'll also look at other funds overview for 2025, and then we will talk about the capital improvement requests. So here is the budget calendar. You'll see we're in the third quarter there. Tonight, we're doing the August 12th presentation of the draft proposal. We would like to get your feedback and direction on having the proposed budget available by September 3rd in preparation for the public hearing on September 16th. Here's the CIP process. And notice we're in step 4 of that, where we present our recommendations to you tonight. So as I mentioned, we'd like to get your direction on posting the proposed budget in preparation for that September 16th budget hearing. We have developed 2 options for your consideration, and both of those take into account the slower sales tax growth that we've seen recently. So option 1 is a base budget and only includes enhancements that staff feels are needed for safe and efficient government. Option 2 is option 1 plus some staffing enhancements, some initial IT enhancements, and a few smaller enhancements. Most of those have revenue offsets or can be shared with the costs with the city's enterprise funds. We will also be looking for direction on the capital projects list, and that's about just a little over $10 million. So we're going to start with the general fund overview. So this slide shows 2024 year-end estimates as they stand today, and then the 2025 proposed budget. So you'll notice the sales and use tax line there. We have reduced that by about $2 million based on that slowing growth that we're seeing. That's what we're estimating at the end of the year. You'll see expenditures there. We did split out enhancements so you can see the year-to-year comparison there. And overall, we're projecting net operating surplus of just about $50,000, so just a small surplus. We've got transfers down there below. Most of that $5 million line is for capital projects, about $4.5 million of it is. The other $400,000 is for EDDA's sales tax increment. So we're estimating a net change in fund balance of about $4.8 million. And that'll leave us with $20 million at the end of 2024. And then you'll see 2025, we've got our projections in our budget proposal. A slight increase in sales tax, that's under 2%. Significantly less than our projections the last few years. Property tax, we're leaving even. There are a number of state level initiatives out there that could impact this, so we're not including any increase for next year. All other revenues are down just a small amount. That overall increase is about 1.1% in revenue. Under your expenditures, you've got your salaries and benefits. We'll talk a little bit more about those here in a minute. And then your other expenditures, again, a very small increase, less than 0.25%. There's our enhancement request for 2025. This is option 1. Once again, we'll show you 2 options. And that leaves us a net operating deficit of about 1.7 million. Under your transfers down below, small amount from the PIF for debt service. The transfers out, once again, EDDA is about 400,000, and we are requesting about 1.5 million to transfer out for capital projects. That leaves us a net change in fund balance of about 3.5, and that leaves us an ending fund balance of about 16.5 million. Here's the breakdown of that 16.5 million. You've got your Tabor restriction, a small amount still restricted from the stadium refund. And if we leave reserves at 16.7%, that's about 11.8 million, and that leaves an unassigned fund balance at the end of 2025 of 2.4 million. Here are some of the factors that play into that expenditure budget. We're proposing an across-the-board 2% increase in wages. That has been negotiated with the two employee groups, so those two are locked in. A very modest increase in medical insurance. Our HR department did a great job of negotiating that. No increase in dental. And all other expenditures, including transfers, a decrease of about 9.5%. So here's a breakdown of the revenues. Very few changes. Once again, sales and use tax, about 1.9% increase. Charges for services is a little bit of an increase, mostly inflationary. Everything else is mostly flat. Overall, once again, under 2% increase overall. Here's the uses of funds. Once again, most departments are flat or very little change. Legislation there looks like a big drop, but it's just because we split out the city clerk's office. Interdepartmental programs down there toward the bottom. We have fully implemented the class and comp study, so that is not included in there any longer. That's why there's a drop for 2025. And then your biggest factor there is the transfers out. So overall, uses of funds down about 4%. Here's those numbers in by categorized, by classification. See, your biggest number there is personnel. Personnel costs are about 63% of the general fund budget. We've identified some savings in commodities and contractual. And again, there's your transfer out, which is the biggest impact on the lower budget number. Just a little comparison of the regional wage increases. Once again, we've proposed 2%. If you'll recall, in 2024, the city provided a 5% increase. So that's a 2-year average of 3.5%. That's a little bit above the statewide average of 3%. Here's just a graphical presentation of that, of your salaries and benefits costs. Now I'm going to turn it over to Manager Nolan. She's going to talk about our enhancement requests.
Did anybody have any questions?
So Ms. Nolan, I was going to ask, is it best to go through your slides and then take questions once we get to option 1 and option 2, or is this the best place to stop?
This is a good
This is a good place? Okay,
to
we'll
pause
take,
and then, yep.
thank you for that. Member Noonkep, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I had one question on the general fund use of funds slide. I thought you said that legislation was reduced because the city clerk's office moved. Did you say legislation or administration?
Administration, sorry.
Okay, and so that accounts for the 33% for administration. Do we know what the reduction is for legislation?
I do not.
We can provide you that information.
Yeah, I can look that up.
I was just curious since the other ones had explanations and that's the only one that looks somewhat large.
It's a very small dollar amount, even though it looks like a big percentage.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Member Russell.
Thank you. My question is on the next slide, the general fund, uses of funds. How can we project less on this, seeing that everything else is increasing in price?
The biggest change is the transfers out for capital spending. That you'll notice all the other lines are very small changes. Yeah, the bulk of that almost all of it is transfers out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Member Ward?
I'm always interested in the year-to-year comparison. So refresh my memory, last year we planned for a structural deficit mostly attributable to capital. But this year, we're potentially planning for a structural deficit attributed to operations, which is the first year I can ever remember in the history of my following city government that we have done that. That would be at least 10 years. My question on that is, what does the future look like, and how is that sustainable in your opinion?
Well, we wouldn't want to sustain it for many years in a row, of course. We're seeing a slowdown in sales tax growth. That's the main factor, what we're doing here. I wouldn't imagine that would be going on for more than a year or so. I mean, a recession is 2 quarters. They're not calling for one. Well, there's about 30% chance last I saw of an actual recession. And so that would be 6 months worth. And then we would expect things to get back into normal, depending on, there are a lot of factors, of course, international, national, political, so.
So keeping in mind that you don't actually possess a crystal ball, what I hear you saying is that you suspect that any change in position that we're planning for this year for the 2025 cycle would be effectively likely temporary as opposed to the sign of a larger slide to come.
That's what we're seeing, and then what we're seeing from the other sources, statewide sources as well, is that they're not projecting a prolonged downturn.
Great, thank you.
All right. Member Prank, go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation so far. So I noticed in some of the key revenue highlights in the analysis section of the memo, you're speaking to the fact that we have not raised marijuana sales tax per what's allowed. And so are you including that in here as a suggestion or hope that we would consider looking at that? I see that you've left it flat for now, but given the fact that we're looking at potential reduction in sales tax revenue coming into the city, is that something that we should be strongly considering?
Well, we put it in there so that you know that it's an option. If I recall correctly, the last couple of times it's come up for discussion, there hasn't been an appetite from council to do that. This may be a different situation.
And I could provide some color on that as well.
That's what I was going to do too. Go ahead.
Okay, so, and part of the reason why, Member Prang, I think the last time we raised it was maybe 2020 or 2021. And, I think we have received in the past where we compare with Denver, and I'm not sure where we are with other municipalities, with Littleton and some of the other ones in terms of where we are with sales tax for marijuana specifically. But I think if we are going to look at raising sales taxes, I do think that we need to involve the 4 marijuana shops that are involved, because they did come. The previous time we did this, we didn't involve them in the discussion, but they had to let us know what the impacts were to their business at that time if we were to raise the sales tax. So we haven't looked at it, but I think part of it is like, we can look at it again. Let's just compare where we are with other municipalities, but also make sure that we involve the 3 or 4 shops that are part of our city as part of a collaborative discussion on potential impacts as well, so.
And I would just add that we have seen marijuana sales tax decreasing since 2021, pretty steadily.
Increasing or decreasing?
Decreasing, fairly steadily.
Member Russell.
So my question was along the same lines. The fact that we've already seen a decrease, are other cities decreasing their price? Is that why we're not selling as much marijuana in Englewood, or?
The last report I saw, and it was from Denver, is the spike was COVID-related. People were at home and had time.
Okay.
And a desire, I guess.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any further questions, or I'll pass it to you, Ms. Nolan.
Alrighty, good evening, council. The comprehensive, I just wanted to make a note that the comprehensive enhancement list is provided in the appendix of your packet. And this list was provided to City Council back in June, and any changes to that information is highlighted in red font. So when you see the red smattering of red font throughout the presentation, it's due to changes from that June report. Wanted to bring to your attention, as you can see, we've got two options in front of you this evening regards to our enhancements that are included in the preliminary budget statement that Kevin has just presented to you. And they're based basically on safe and efficient government. And then option 2 includes everything that's included in option 1, plus 3 additional enhancements. So this first slide is a summary of the proposed enhancements that are included in the proposed budget. You'll notice that we have revenue offsets for some of the department requests, and there's also some FTEs associated with the enhancements. And the total enhancements included in the budget total $1,171,000. Funding from other funds totals about $143,000, and funding from the general fund specifically will be about $128,000 or $1,028,000. On this slide, I just wanted to talk about the enhancements from the administration department. We've got a management fellow position. This is the second year of the 2-year commitment for that pilot program. The $55,000 revenue offset really should be applicable to the next enhancement request right below it regarding this Tri-Cities homelessness coordinator position. Enhancement number 3, the hazardous waste program, we're reducing that from $35,000 down to 27.5 or $27,500, and this is the At Your Door program that was implemented this year. We have $2,000 each from the Englewood Ride program enhancement request, as well as the sustainability grant. Enhancement number 6, the Garden in the Box. That $4,000 will be funded through the Water Fund and still administered by the Sustainability Program Administrator. Sustainability Events Funds, they're requesting $2,000 for 2025. And then the half-time Green Business Coordinator position is partially funded through $8,000 from City of Sheridan. The remainder is from the bag fees that have been collected through the city. That's that 10-cent bag fee that we're charged if we request a bag, at the grocery store. And then potentially what's going to be brought forth to council is expanding that program for also the city of Englewood or the city of Littleton to include them in the Green Business program. The next slide from the Human Resources Department, we have some employment assessment training and personal development for employees included in the 2025 budget request. Funding for our finance manager position, it's a 0.25 FTE, is being requested, and that's due to, under the Risk Management Fund, the property and casualty duties are being reassigned from HR and finance to the city attorney's office. So we now need to finance from the general fund that 0.25 FTE position through the general fund. It was formerly financed through the Risk Management Fund. The Community Development Program, the shuttle enhancements, the $360,000 request is being offset by $300,000 RTD grant and $30,000 of the $60,000 match is going to be financed through the Englewood Downtown Development Authority. So the bottom line impact to our general fund is $30,000 that we'll need to fund. The Parks, Recreation, Library, and Golf enhancement requests, their 2025 program requests will be funded one time through the Donors Fund. Information technology, these ongoing software and the part-time GIS technician position will be offset through some chargebacks to enterprise funds. That's the revenue amount that you see on the chart. The balance, again, will be financed through the general fund. The Police Department flock safety programming cost for 2025, $33,500 is being requested for 2025 to be funded through the forfeiture funds out of the Donors Fund. Oops, excuse me. Public Works, the patch truck improvements, the $50,000 is going to be offset through their new degradation fee that the Public Works Department is proposing due to street cuts. This next slide are the option 2 requests. Again, these include option 1, and then we've highlighted in yellow the option 2 changes. And they're mainly from the City Clerk's Office, Finance Department, and the Communications Department. So the City Clerk's Office is proposing with their $29,000 additional passport fees, 10 additional hours for customer service assistants, passport agents, as well as a promotion of a department assistant to a deputy city clerk. The Finance Department additional request is a one-time request of financial advisory services for the general obligation bonds. In the event that the general obligation bond ballot measure does not pass this November, we may have some financial advisory services costs that we'll need to absorb in our budget. In the event that the GO bonds ballot measure does pass, we can roll in the any financial advisory service costs into the issue costs. And then the last item for option 2 is the change in our visual communication specialist position from part-time to full-time. And we have approximately, the initial slides indicated $120,000 of revenue offset. This revenue offset is really $102,000. There was a typo there, so I apologize for that. But this is more soft dollars. It's not actual revenues, but the marketing efforts of our communications departments, we feel have some sort of impact in the overall increase to our parks, recreation, library, and golf programs from our 3 facilities, which is the Malley Center, the Recreation Center, and Pirates Cove. The additional revenue summaries, the revenues that I haven't already spoken to pertain to finance, which is our waste transfer surcharge fee. We're proposing a change to keep up with the consumer price index, changing the fee from 63 cents per cubic yard to 67 cents, and that would yield about $59,000, almost $60,000. Community development, we have an additional ongoing revenue stream in the event that the vacant property registration ordinance passes. We're anticipating $20,000 from that fee being implemented, as well as $10,000 from the enforcement of stop work orders. Both the police and Public Works, we've got a placeholder of for the dedicated sales tax increase year over year from 2024 to 2025. For police, it's around 23,000, and for public works, it's around 46,000. And I don't know if there's any initial questions on option 1 or option 2 before I pass this over to Kevin to go over the other funds enhancements.
And
Are there
go ahead.
I was going to ask if there were any questions, but City Manager Lewis, is there something you want to add before we go into questions?
Yeah, I think we would benefit from spending, more concentrated time on the general fund. That's really where our shortfall is for this year. And just to give you a little bit of background, my thanks to Kevin and Jenny and Tyson and others in the finance department that have worked hard on this. We have really gone over this and over this and over this. This is probably the first year, I think, since in my 5 years, that we haven't proposed any new staff. And that has been, I think, surprising to our departments, but they understand, the position that we're in, which is not a terrible financial situation. We've actually had worse years financially, but as we've looked over this budget, the items that we've included, we feel like are those items that are really necessary. If you made me prioritize those and whittle those down more, we could do that. But we feel like that this represents both option 1 and option 2, if you trust the projected revenues that could come about from the additional improvements. We feel like that this is a prudent use of our unassigned fund balance, which is roughly, I think what we're requesting is roughly about what the operating budget gave back last year. So unspent from 2023 is about what we're asking for from the unassigned fund balance this year to create a structurally balanced budget for you this year.
Thank you, City Manager Lewis. Member Russell, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One of them is on the enhancement number 2, Tri-Cities Homelessness Coordinator. Have we already gone past the 3-year initial?
We have not as of now. However, if this was approved, it would go past that. But we have enough money to get us through the end of this fiscal year.
And is this also part of the reason we have a structural deficit? I mean, if we started cutting on some of these, would it help with the structural deficit?
Yes, any line item in the budget that you see would help us reduce that amount, yes.
Okay, so my other question is, the county was here not too long ago, and they're looking, I don't know, have they decided what they're gonna do yet? Are they putting a tax increase on the ballot, or are they cutting expenses? Do you have any idea what they're doing?
The last meeting that I had with the commissioners and the mayors in the county was that they plan to take a debrucing ballot measure to the voters to allow them to keep that amount that Tabor requires them to reduce their mill levy.
And if the answer of the taxpayers is no, will they be cutting this?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay. That's my question for now about that, but I have one more question. I have a problem with enhancement number 6, garden in a box. Why are we using utilities money for the garden in a box? The utilities is funded totally by fees. And so why are we using that?
Thank you for the question. I'll mention a couple of things from the first question as well, is that the county doesn't actually contribute to the direct costs of the homelessness coordinator. So that's funded by the 3 cities. And it's our understanding that the 3 cities plan to contribute their portion for the additional year. But the county certainly provides office, equipment, that sort of thing, and administrative support for that position. So I just want to be clear that the county isn't directly funding that position. On the question of garden in a box, this was in the first presentation that you saw in the budget was coming from the general fund. As we went through our budget review committee, which is Finance, City Manager's Office, and the Internal Service Department. We were looking at the fact that currently Utilities is already funding the turf replacement program, which is really an effort to try to reduce water usage. It's a conservation program, and conservation programs are typically funded by the Utilities Department in any city. Denver Water has a number of this type of conservation type programs, and the Water Department is already working with the company that does this for turf replacement is the same company that does Garden in a Box. So again, it's a way to try to reduce turf and increase kind of plants, native plantings, pollinating plantings, and reduce the amount of grass that takes more water. But certainly, we can either remove this from the budget or try to squeeze it back into the general fund. But it is a common program of utilities departments.
Right, and so my biggest concern here is we have a 4.5% increase in the water bill, a 4.5% increase in the sewer, and a 5% increase in the stormwater. And taxpayers are already, or fee and ratepayers are already struggling. And to continue to add more things to that, I have a problem with that. But that's where I'm thinking. I just wanted to let you know. So, thank you.
No, that's helpful, and I appreciate that. This was an increase over last year. When we had the council presentation, there were a number of council members who said, oh, this is the program that is all used up within a week. Maybe we should upfund this a little bit. So we were really trying to find a way to get it into the budget without, further affecting that deficit. But your point's well taken that, these are ratepayer funded programs.
Thank you.
Member Noonan-Kemp.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I can tell a lot of thoughtfulness and debate has gone into this, and I really appreciate that. I have a couple questions, especially City Manager, you mentioned the no new FTEs, which is something that's significant, and I want to ask about a couple of the FTE adjustments that are in here now. There is the 0.5 FTE Green Business Coordinator, and it says it's partially funded by bag fees, and then it says Littleton, revenue offsets 8,000. But I think below on the slide, it says that it was totally 100% funded by the bag fees, and we were sharing it with Sheridan. Can I just get clarity on that?
I think the Deputy City Manager Dodd can answer this, but I do want to clarify that I think the presentation said Sheridan, but it's actually Littleton, and I believe they just approved that ordinance.
So it's both. So it was first Sheridan for $8,000, and then Littleton, I believe the number is around $50,000. So the total cost for the program is about $100,000. On the Englewood side, which is about $45,000 or so, 40,000, I think, it's fully funded by bag fees. I also believe that the other two cities are also funding their portion by bag fees as well.
Okay, so the 8,000 revenue offsets, not the bag fees, that's what?
That's Sheridan's portion,
Okay, but not Littleton's portion.
but not Littleton's portion, which is about 50,000.
Okay,
And that just got passed last week, so I think that's right? That they just
I
approved
believe
that?
so.
Right.
and if we didn't use the bag fees for this, what else could we use the bag fees for?
They can be used for any kind of program relative to basically waste reduction, programs that involve programs that engage businesses in any kind of waste reduction or greening of the business, so to speak. There's a very small portion that can also be used internally for the management of the program. And when I say that, the financial management, not the person doing the work.
Super helpful, thank you. My other question was about the management fellow, and you may have said this, and I'm sorry if I missed it. The $55,000 revenue offset, is that because we are also sharing them? Where's that coming from?
That was a typo.
Oh, that's the typo for the one
That-
below, that's right.
The
You said
55,000
that.
should go down towards the Tri-Cities, because that's the ARPA funding.
Yes, you said that. I'm so sorry, I forgot. City Manager, can you share a little bit more about what you think the scope for this role would be next year? I know in the materials it says what they did last year or this current year, but what's the vision for this and how they would provide potentially a leveraged effect for the entire organization?
Yes, thank you for the question, Member Noonan-Kemp. As Budget Manager Nolan said, this is the second of a 2-year commitment to the program. And for instance, next week you'll see the complete revamp of our special event and food truck licensing that the management fellow has put together, working with a number of departments. There are a number of programs like that, the ambassador program that we've started this year that individual is running. And so Deputy City Manager Dodd, as the supervisor of that position, can give you some ideas about next year. Deputy City Manager
Yeah,
Dodd?
thank you, Member Noonan Kim. It's a great question. One of the things that we hope in year two would be to support some projects that are, I would say, specific to departments, but also have impacts across the city. So I have two examples of that. One is that they're about to start working on two HR policies, two administrative policies. One of which is a major need that we don't have one. And so she's beginning to work on those two initiatives with our HR department, as well as the policy committee that involves 7 other departments. The second is she's had initial conversations with our public works director about doing an assessment for accreditation through the American Association of Public Works. It's a very, very comprehensive program that usually takes a couple years to do. There's many benefits that come from it, but it really takes someone to be able to kind of look at it holistically. There's a whole framework they have that takes about 8 months to basically do an assessment of our readiness. So those are two initiatives that they'll be one they've started, one they'll start soon, that we believe will help benefit departments across the city.
That's really helpful clarity. And just to make sure I understand, you're viewing this role kind of like as a generalist, a center fielder who you can leverage to help other departments as needed where maybe they don't have the staff or the capacity.
Absolutely. And, some of the topics that we brought up or the projects are ones that have been council priorities, certainly the food truck licensing and some of those, even some of the personnel policies. These are things that we have needed very badly to get to for a number of years, but because they haven't risen to the level of, having the staff capacity or resource to do, this individual has been able to take those on, as well as Deputy City Manager Dodd mentioned, helping other departments as well. So as we looked at this, it was really, we felt like worth the investment of a second year, just as a force multiplier to get caught up on a number of things. And I do think at the end of the second year that we would be able to, feel that catch up that we could have, and then probably start getting behind a little again and hopefully find other staffing resources in the future.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much, guys.
Any further questions? Oh, go ahead, Member Pring.
Thank you. I may be backtracking a little bit, but I want to make sure that I ask the question before we move too much further along. I had a note that I saw a 5.8% decrease in contractual services. So it may be from earlier in the presentation, but I just wanted to understand what that decrease is. I know that we're moving some of our emergency services in-house, and so that would be a reduction, but there were other areas listed such as the crisis intervention team contract with All Health. Does that mean that that contract is ending? Were those examples areas that we're not continuing on? And I apologize, but I don't have a page number.
Thank you, Councilmember Pring. I believe that was through our council communication, we provided that information. So overall, we did have a decrease. Our crisis intervention team, All Health, because we have brought a position in-house, their contract to us has been reduced. I forget the dollar amount right at this point in time, but we can get you that information. So there's so many different professional services, but our overall line has been reduced by that 5.8%. We can get you more specifics.
Yeah, I think I'd appreciate just
Because
which
the
contracts
fire
are ending and what those dollar amounts are.
Okay.
I think I asked the question because we're in a time where prices are increasing for everything. So to see, a fairly significant decrease in our contractual services, I'd want to understand what those are.
We can definitely provide that for you. You did mention the one with the county that is being reduced. And then the second one you mentioned, we have brought the All Health, can't remember, Navigator. No, case coordinator that we had, that was previously with All Health, is now an in-house staff resource. Another one that comes to mind is our median maintenance. We were able to reduce that by over 50,000 by bringing that as a position internally to the organization that's now doing all of that median maintenance. So it's really spread throughout the city, but we'll be glad to get you some details on that.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions from council? Go ahead, Ms. Nolan. Actually, Member Noonan-Camp.
I'm so
go ahead.
sorry. I have one. I just want to make sure I'm reading the slides correctly so that I understand especially the structural adjustment from the unassigned fund balance. On the enhancements, kind of option one opening slide where it says funding from general fund, it's the 1,027,000. Is that the amount that we would need to take from unassigned fund balance to structurally balance the budget? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, part of it is from the enhancements. We also include under the transfer out to the capital project funds, we also have about $1,550,000 transfer that we're also requesting city council to consider.
Correct. And then for option two, the difference is 106,000,
Yeah,
almost
that-
107. Okay,
107,000.
that's
yeah.
helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, go ahead, Ms. Nolan.
I believe Kevin's going to be taking this next section on our other funds. Sorry. Okay.
There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, now we're going to look at all the other funds and their proposals. We've talked about the general fund. These are the other governmental type funds. So we'll look at special revenue. Pretty much business as usual here. You'll see those three outlined columns. Not much difference, so I'm not going to go through these individually unless you have specific questions on those. Same for debt service. That's pretty well locked in from year to year, almost no change. I do want to point out a couple of things on the capital projects funds at the bottom. You'll notice that in column D there, the beginning January 1 fund balance of 27 million. And then if you go all the way to the right, the ending proposed fund balance for next year is 4 million. So we're spending a lot of that capital that council has allocated to those funds. Here are your proprietary type funds. So the enterprise funds, a similar situation to those capital project funds. You'll see the water fund, stormwater fund in particular. Those fund balances are going down considerably. We're drawing down those and using those for capital projects. The other enterprise funds don't have a lot of change from prior years. Internal service funds at the bottom, not much change there. Capital equipment is going down. We are proposing for 2025 that will be a heavy vehicle replacement year, so that fund balance is going down some. And risk management is also going down some. We have seen increased claims over the last few years. So the proposed enhancements for all the other funds, you've got Public Works and the Stormwater Fund. They're proposing $100,000. We'll go through the details on these here in just a second. City Attorney's Office with Risk Management. Utilities Water Fund and Utilities Sewer Fund. And then South Platte Renew for a total enhancement request of 1.9 million. Oops. Not sure what I did there. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so stormwater, they are proposing to purchase a water pipe inspection trailer. That's the $100,000 for them. Risk management, Jenny had mentioned earlier in the general fund presentation. This is the other piece of that, and this is to transfer the risk management, part of the risk management responsibilities from finance into the city attorney's office. Now that enhancement is in the risk management fund. Now you've got your water fund and utilities. That's $250,000 for the master plan update and $80,000 for some additional legal resources. Sewer fund is also doing a master plan update. That's $125,000. And under South Platte Renew, they are proposing 2 additional staff members, some additional professional services, and some software costs. Additional revenue being proposed. These are all fee increases, a small one for the golf course. I believe they're increasing green fees. Storm drainage fund, water fund, and sewer fund are all rate increases. And that total revenue is about 2.4 million. All right, do we want to pause for questions for these other funds? before we
Yeah,
get into
let's see if
capital
there's any
improvements?
questions from council on the last few slides. Anything? No? All right,
All right,
Mayor, if I could.
sure, go ahead.
Just as we start putting the budget to in a format that can be taken to public hearing, particularly as you've heard your fellow council members give feedback, has some of that resonated to the point that there are some changes needed within the enhancement list that you've seen? Or is there a more general direction for staff to further reduce or bring down the number that we are proposing to pull from the unassigned fund balance? That type of input would be very helpful now as we start finalizing the budget.
I can give some input in terms of what we just saw with these last few, with the water, sewer, stormwater, those, like, I don't have any issue with what's being proposed. Regarding the general fund, I'm leaning towards option 2. I think there is a little bit of concern that I have in terms of just, well, we're going to be talking about it a little bit later, but revenues or sales tax, sales tax revenues are basically flat at this point this year. And my concern is just, what does next year look like? I know we can't look into the future, but that's the concern, that we're going to be adding expenses and drawing from the unassigned fund balance to pay for operating, for operating expenses, some of which are reoccurring. There's a concern, but I'm also looking at the list of enhancements, and I'm trying to figure out what is it that I would cut, because I don't see anything that really moves the needle there unless we're making big changes to some of the big programs that we have in place, and I'm not ready to do that yet. So for me, it's still option 2, but there is a little bit of hesitancy. So, Member Noonan-Camp.
Sure, I'm happy to weigh in as well. I am leaning towards option 1 at this point. Doesn't mean I can't be persuaded, but similar to the mayor, as I go through this list and I look, okay, what could be cut? I immediately see the hard staff work that has happened, because most of the things are things that we are not paying for the 100% on. So it's like, where are we finding cost savings? Where do we have partners who are paying for a large share of the load? Where if we were to cut, one example is the hazardous waste drop-off program, or now it's pickup program. Is that the most critical thing we need to run a safe and efficient government? But then when you look and understand how we're partnering and how we reduce the costs, it becomes, it's a thoughtful approach. And so I appreciate the thoughtfulness so far, and I can see where we've landed on several things because of that. I don't know if I'm there on option 2 yet. I would like to wait and make final, get final direction until after we also go through the CIP, because as we're talking about unassigned fund balance, that's also always a CIP conversation. And so I want to see if there are one-time projects we want to approve, or do we, for $100,000, or do we want to save that and go up to that option 2 enhancement? But at this point, I see the thoughtfulness, and there's nothing that I see as blatantly out of place.
Anyone else want to weigh in? Go ahead, Member Ward.
I think I'm also comfortable with option 2. I thought I saw something, yeah. The only thing in option 2 that I think is a little curious to me is the annual support for access control and badging system at $75,000. That's almost the cost of an FTE. And I don't understand why we poured so much money into a new badge system in our capital program, and now we're being asked to pay $75,000 a year for support of that system. That seems really questionable to me.
We did have quite a bit of discussion on that. Is IT represented tonight?
That's on page
Yes, I'm here.
65 of the packet.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
So the annual support and maintenance, that is a budgetary estimate, and it's based on support costs of support and maintenance costs for the hardware itself. It's something that can be approached from a time and materials sort of thing as well. So there's an option there that we can look at, but this would essentially give us the ability to keep those the software updated, firmware updates, things of that nature, to make sure that the system runs smoothly. There would also be training opportunities there as well.
And Joe, of course, is our Director of IT. Thank you, Joe. We had talked about that this was something that could potentially be pushed a year. I thought that was actually our last discussion before we put this council memo to bed. Did I dream that, Jenny?
No, you didn't. I guess I'm lost.
Yeah, we're not actually finding that, remember?
I'm not.
Ward?
Yeah, I was looking for the item
This,
as well.
this could be because I downloaded the packet on Thursday,
Oh,
and then it was
yes.
updated, and I just found out that it was updated, so it
Yes.
could be something that I'm looking at here.
Okay, sorry about
I've
that.
lost
Yes,
everybody else
you
because
are
I'm using a
correct.
different version of the packet.
We did take that off of this because we did decide that we could push that a year. So thank you for the question, and apologies for the confusion on packet versions.
The other question I have, which I think is still valid, or at least I hope is still valid, but if it's not, then I'll stand corrected again. The updates for Public Works for the truck? Yeah, the refurbished existing patch truck. This would be for the members following along. Page 62 of the packet. I believe that's the correct version of the packet that I'm looking at now. Revenue offset is listed as 100K, but the cost is 50K. How does this generate any revenue at all?
I wouldn't say that it generate the refurbishment of the truck. I wouldn't say that actually generates revenue. However, Public Works is proposing a new fee, the street degradation fee due to street cuts. And I would say the patch truck helps in the patching of those street cuts.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Victor Rochelle, Director of Public Works. Jenny's correct. It's being offset by that new street degradation fee because we are having to go back and patch failed, I'll call them longer term, more than 12 months repairs that have been done by contractors, whether it's, Xcel Energy or natural gas or something like that.
So are we charging that fee to the contractor on the front end or on the back end after we effect the repair?
The goal is to charge it on the front end as part of the permitting process.
Okay, so we just assume it's gonna fail?
No, it's a fee for cutting into the asphalt for long-term maintenance and improvements of our streets.
Okay, so we're taking a portion of that fee, not the entirety of the fee, to do this?
To calculate the offset, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And to clarify for the public, all street cuts fail. It's just a matter of when. So we require them to restore it to a certain standard. But the fact is, any time that the street is cut, there will be, it can never be restored fully. So this is a fee that helps us pay for that over time.
All right. Any further questions from council? Or actually, there were two members that haven't weighed in on just initial thoughts on budget. Go ahead.
As of right now, I think I'm leaning toward being okay with option 2. There's not a significant price tag difference between the two. And I do feel like in option 2, there are some enhancements that have potential to continue to help build our revenue. For example, additional supports for the passport office, and I think that that's been a really good movement for the city, and we could continue to build on bringing revenue in. So as of right now, I'm leaning toward option 2. I mean, if the majority of council wanted to slice and dice through, like, I'm not prepared to look at every single line item in here, but I'm especially interested in any of those enhancements that have potential to continue to grow revenue for us.
Go ahead, Member Russell.
I have a question on the city clerk passport enhancements. It didn't totally cover the cost, correct? I mean, it only covered a portion of it.
Thank you for the question, Member Russell. So depending on the range that for the promotion that's listed here, depending on where that range landed, if it was at the lower end, it could fully fund, because I think that those revenue offsets were 29,000. So unless my math, oh, I see, you're right. So when we originally looked at this one in terms of being completely cost neutral, we were not including the promotion. And so that is something that you may see a change between now and when that comes back to you. If for instance, in option 2, you really wanted to focus on just what's going to be revenue neutral, that is one that we probably would be taking out, was the promotion.
Okay.
Can I just add in there?
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
So can you hear me okay?
Yes, could you introduce yourself?
Yep, Stephanie Carlisle, City Clerk. Just wanted to add something in there. We had to give a range of what our estimate of what the salary increase would be, and we had to do that, based on a certain range. We do think that the revenue offset will be stronger than the 29,000 that's in there. We just, we want to make sure that we were responsible with our numbers. So there were a couple of factors, but I genuinely do believe that with the additional hours that we can generate additional revenue, that would more than cover the departmental assistant promotion as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Go ahead, Ms. Nolan.
Thank you, Victor. All righty, we're on to our capital projects discussion. And just to remind everyone, our prioritization and ranking of our capital requests of the Public Improvement Fund and Capital Projects Fund is due in part just, to the limited funding that's available for these requests. And as a reminder, our Public Improvement Fund, the three major funding sources come from vehicle use tax, construction / building use, materials use tax, and Arapahoe County road and bridge tax. This next slide provides you a high-level overview of our sources and uses of funds. What's included in our Public Improvement Fund proposal is the repurposing of the Broadway US 285 interchange project of about $3.9 million. The building efficiency project of $2.5 million. We currently have $200,000 set aside of ARPA funds. The city also received a public building electrification grant of $750,000. And we're proposing the use of the general fund unassigned fund balance of approximately $1,550,000 to fully fund that 2.5 year out project list. And then of the IT capital requests, there was one for the rugged, the replacement of the rugged laptops for all of the patrol cars, and that's about $375,000, and we're requesting the use of the police headquarter construction fund, or what we've also heard used as the bond premium fund. This slide of the 2025 Public Improvement Fund and Capital Projects Fund sources of funds. So for the Public Improvement Fund, we're estimating $3 million from vehicle use tax, about $900,000 from construction or building materials use tax, $190,000 from Arapahoe County Road and Bridge, And then, as I mentioned earlier, the 3.9 million repurposing of the Broadway 285 interchange grant match that we've set aside. For the Capital Projects Fund, again, I mentioned we have 200,000 from the ARPA funds for the energy efficiency project, 750,000 grant that was awarded through the Colorado Energy Office. And then, again, the request for the $1,550,000 from the general fund unassigned fund balance. And also, as I mentioned, the use of the police headquarter construction fund, unappropriated fund balance of $350,000. This slide provides our capital requests, uses of funds by department. And then our next slide provides our uses in terms of one-time versus ongoing use or needs for certain capital requests. And these next two slides provide the PIF and Capital Projects Fund capital requests with an overall ranking. So next to the line item column is the overall ranking of our capital project funds. And it's the average of the department score, our internal capital review committee scores, scores from our Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as the Budget Advisory Committee. You'll notice that on line 9, staff has moved up the ranking of the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program. It's ranked at 24 out of 30, I think 38 projects. And we have to establish the program first before we can actually implement the capital improvements, which is on line 10 for the implementation of neighborhood traffic calming. So that's the only adjustment we've made to that overall ranking list. And then the last two slides just provide the Public Improvement Fund capital requests and the Capital Projects Fund. We provide, just to the left of the original request for 2025, a revised 2025 request. Any changes to that request that was provided back in June is highlighted in red. And with that, we'll take any questions you might have regarding our CIP.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nolan, for that. Go ahead, Member Russell.
Thank you. My question is, did Planning and Zoning and the Budget Advisory Committee move that line item number 24 up? Or did they did not fund that?
I believe they funded that. I'll have to go back and look at the actual scores. Staff actually moved that up because we had to establish that program before we could. The average score of the implementation neighborhood traffic calming program, line 10, that had a higher ranking than the establishing the program itself. So, so there might have been just some confusion on how we scored that.
And Mayor, you've probably noticed, but we do have all of our directors either online or in person, so we'd be glad to have technical questions answered by them. Do you have anything to add, Director Rochelle?
Thank you. No, thank you, Jenny. Jenny, spot on. We need to implement the program or develop the program before we roll out implementation into the community. So that's why staff moved it up. ETAC committee did rank the creation of the program and implementation as one of their top priorities.
So does that also, are we going to be doing this year or not until 2025? The traffic calming?
The specific program development, complete development of the program and implementation specific to the parameters of the program are in the 2025 budget. We did propose it in 2024. However, it did not, given competing priorities, make the cut.
And Are we in the design phase?
No, the intent of the program is for it to be resident-driven. Residents would request traffic calming measures, staff would collect data, and then depending on the results of that data, a specific tool in the toolbox would be implemented in the community to address the speeding concern that has been documented.
So does that have to do with the safe routes to school, or what about the traffic calming on Dartmouth Avenue?
So all three are actually separate, specific to what you see in the list on the screen here. That is the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program. We do intend to apply for the Safe Routes to School, which is somewhat similar but separate. We are collaborating right now with a grants writer with the school district to advance that application. And then the traffic calming on the east side of Dartmouth was a grant in collaboration with CDOT to address a documented high accident correctable pattern at those two intersections.
If I can add a little bit more to that, because you may remember you had someone that came and spoke about the west side of between Broadway and Santa Fe on Dartmouth. This would be a program that this could address. So it's residents that come forward and say, we need a solution for slower traffic. So we would be, using innovative approaches that, could be striping, could be, devices that are placed temporarily or semi-permanently in the roadway. Some ways of slowing traffic down that are really requested by residents and that can help address specific needs.
Okay.
Thank you, Sean.
But I want to make a statement about that. On the west side of Broadway, Dartmouth is a truck route. And does that mean we're going to have to reestablish that we can't use a truck route there?
No, all of that data would be taken into account as we look for solutions in that area. Dartmouth is one of our few east-west connections that go all the way from Broadway to Santa Fe to Union, or excuse me, to Federal.
Yeah, actually, the truth is it goes all the way from Colorado Boulevard
Right.
to Federal. So I'm pretty sure probably east of University, it's probably not a truck route.
I don't believe so. I think you're correct.
Okay, thank you.
Before I move to Member Noonan-Camp, Director Rochelle, can you talk about what the program is? Like, what goes into that $100,000 to establish the program?
So, yeah, we will be working with, the intent is to work with city staff, to work with a consultant to develop the parameters of the program, the inputs, the forms, the communication, the public outreach, the parameters around the data, what drives the decisions, and developing that toolbox of what we can deploy depending on what the data comes back once a resident comes forward with a concern that has support of additional residents, and really to tell us which way to go based on what we're seeing in the community.
So Director Rochelle, is this going to be resident driven and not necessarily city driven? Are we not prioritizing specific areas based off of data, or is it going to be a combination of the two, resident plus internal data?
It's a combination of the two. This is intended to be more resident-driven based on concerns. You will see on there, we do have the citywide transportation plan on line 19. That is specifically city-driven, citywide, related to transportation needs within the communities.
But Mayor, to your point, we have a list of kind of known areas where we've had concerns from residents. So I think I don't want to convey to council that we're only going to just sit back and wait for residents. We know where residents have identified areas where speeds are excessive, that there are safety concerns because of proximity to a type of facility, et cetera. So we have some of that data internally, but we also want to have a way to respond when we have resident requests.
Thanks for that clarification, because that was one of the concerns I had there, that we were being a little bit more reactive than. Perfect. All right. Thank you, Director Rochelle, on that. Member Noonan-Camp.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to talk about the traffic calming. As everyone knows, we've heard from multiple different residents about this over the last several months, whether it's an ask for a new crosswalk by school, the speeding near schools, the Dartmouth issue. And I see the thoughtfulness in this, and I feel like staff has been thinking proactively, and we're a little bit out of order because the mayor also just requested a study session on this. And I'm just wondering, do we want to spend $100,000 to set up this program, or do we want to use the money to fix something, to put in a new crosswalk? I really like the idea of building something sustainable, and I also wonder, and this is very rare, I feel, from staff, but if we're overcomplicating it, maybe slightly, is there a lower lift way to get this information besides having to bring in a consultant and do a big, whole big fancy program? I'm not seeing the value prop, and that might be because I'm not fully understanding why we need it. But I do think thinking more proactively about how we're responding to these needs is really important to me. And I think I would just rather see the money put into the actual projects themselves. So help me understand what I'm missing.
Sure, thank you for the question. Again, we're looking for a way to be able to respond to residents that is data-driven, responsive, but also communicated to the public so that the public knows there's this program out there. If you have a concern, you can come forward. Right now, staff resources, we have one traffic engineer, and his time is extremely thin, if available at all, to develop a program on top of managing staff, traffic operations, catching up on past things that have kind of languished over the years. We do have a consultant that helps a little bit, but they're really helping more on the development review side of the house. So I certainly agree with you. We do not want to overcomplicate it, and I'm not saying we'll spend the entire 100,000, but that is kind of an estimated number that we would spend getting that program developed and communicated out to the residents. It also, if funding is available there, we could be using that to collect our own data, as Sean alluded to, in known trouble areas to further verify and confirm what we want to roll out into the community to address speeding and traffic concerns.
Okay, well, I hope we have our study session before we have to approve this line item, because I want more information on how this is all going to connect. We've got 3 different line items for traffic, and I don't see how it connects in kind of some holistic plan, and I just want to make sure I understand before I approve something. I would like to see us invest heavily, considering how much citizen feedback we've gotten, and one of the things I've brought up to city managers is for us to be proactive, not reactive, so I appreciate the thought here. I just don't fully understand how it's all going to connect yet, so hopefully we can keep having that conversation. And I want to also bring up, we did receive also the request for like an actual crosswalk or a hawk crossing or a new light on Fox, I believe is the street.
Yeah, in Oxford.
And in Oxford, thank you. And just understanding like how are those things getting integrated? Are we telling residents you have to wait 2 years because we have to build this program first and then we'll respond to your request once we build the program? I just want to understand how are we making this a little bit too bureaucratic to respond to things that we know are known issues. That's my outstanding question. One other question I have is on our ranking system this year, which thank you so much for including this for my request. It's super helpful to see. I see that I think there are 2 projects that staff, or actually a few that staff designated as tier 2 or tier 3 that are ranked higher. I'm just curious how the staff assessment is on the ranking versus the tiering. And for specifically in rows 15 and 20, we have tier 2 projects who are ranking higher. I don't know who wants to answer that. I think they're both public works items, if you want to keep going.
Yeah, from a ranking perspective, as Jenny had touched on, it's a combined scoring between P and Z and all the other committees that ranked those projects. Sidewalk gap construction, that was something that we'd heard was a priority. It also dovetails into our current ADA efforts. Within the city, we're in the process of conducting an ADA audit of our facilities, and we expect sidewalk gaps to be top of mind on that when we're providing that access and connectivity within the community. Also, a little bit into the walk and wheel plan, which is a tier 1 down at the bottom of the list, but those sidewalk gaps and how those things all tie together. Arterial and street collector maintenance, maintaining our roads has always been a priority, and getting that back up to an acceptable level and score, pavement condition index, are the reason those are up there.
So you're not gaining any insights between the discrepancy of the staff ranking versus the more holistic ranking?
No, other than from a staff's perspective and the feedback that we've received from the various committees, those were higher ranked.
But you would still say tier 2 projects in staff's perspective?
It can, again, it goes back to all the competing priorities. You'll notice near the top, almost all of those are public works. So we're certainly understanding there's budget sensitivity, and we do have to try and balance that. Maybe a little bit self-centered, but love to see all the public works slide up to the tier 1, but we understand there are competing priorities.
Well, I appreciate that because one of the thoughts behind the ranking system was, let's not just divide the pie evenly, make sure everyone gets a piece. Let's make sure we're actually putting the money towards the most important things, even if it is heavier in one department than the other. So I appreciate the reflection. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further comments, questions on capital projects? I guess a point to Member Noonan-Camp to your question about study session. I don't think we had that on the agenda yet. Our timing may be tight for us to have that study session. And I'm not sure, Victor Rochelle, if you're able to comment on how quickly we can have that study session, because we're basically down to 2 weeks from tonight in order to have that study session, because we start, well, no, we don't vote on it until what, the 11th, the 12th, whatever that second week of September is. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mayor. I think from a staff standpoint, it's almost, we need to have the study session. I mean, and to Member Noonan-Camp's point, we haven't been operating with a plan. I mean, it's kind of like our parking program, our residential permit parking program. There was no plan. It was just like, oh, here, you get a permit, you get a permit. And now we're realizing we have this hodgepodge because we didn't do planning. So we're really trying to do planning for this. And I think the study session will help bring some focus to that and help council give direction that can help build the plan, that we're talking about with this. But I think it's okay that the timing doesn't match up exactly with the study session, because we're going to need to do the study session regardless.
Correct.
So this just pushes it up a bit from what we were planning, but I think it maybe kickstarts, to Member Noonan-Camp's point, where we can get to implementation a little sooner. But I would caution council, we've done lots of things without plans in this city for a long time, and in other areas, maybe we've over-planned. But this is an area where we don't want to underplan, because we can get really out of whack with equity throughout the community, with the impacts that doing traffic calming in one neighborhood has on the next neighborhood. So we really want to have a really smart plan that guides us as we go through this.
Right. And if worst comes to worst, we could always amend the budget if we don't see the need for the program itself, or whatever modifications council wants to make at some point next year. The important thing is that we move forward with, if we're going to prioritize neighborhood calming, the important part is to get into the budget and then at some point continue to have this conversation and potentially make modifications based off of council feedback in 2025 or whenever.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Anything else? Go ahead, Member Russell.
So on that same topic, I know that that was one of the recommendations that came forward from the Budget Advisory Committee, was to make certain that we have the plan before we just start implementing. So the study session will help us work on that, correct?
That's
Thank
correct.
you.
Correct.
Perfect. Anything else? Any closing thoughts, Ms. Nolan? That we may have. Do you have something else to add, Member Noonan-Camp? Yes, you do.
I mean, we're here, so I feel like I'm the only one asking questions. We've talked about this before. I want to raise it because, we are looking at a tighter budget this year and a lot of priorities. The one thing here that I just continue to have questions about, or a couple things. I will continue my crusade. I do not support new carpet for the second floor of the Civic Center. That it feels like a luxury in a year that we don't have a lot of luxuries. And then the library's single exit feasibility study construction. Wherever we need an emergency exit for our children's library area to be safe, I strongly support. The feasibility study for the reconstruction of the current exit off of the parking garage, I understand the request for there to be more glass and more visibility, and I certainly understand that. But we also have the security guard sitting there, and I am just wondering if that rises to the level. So that's one that I would want to maybe look at a little bit more. We've not had, from my understanding, as many incidents since we've increased the security. So that's one that it's a large dollar item. I would want to look at that.
Those are excellent points. Christine Underhill, Director of Park, Track, Library, and Golf. As far as the feasibility study, that was completed last year. We went out to bid, and the 130 covers to redo the south entrance. One of the challenges our guards have currently is sightline. They can't see people coming into the south lobby, and so that's why that request is there, as well as adding a emergency exit near the parent room on the northeast side of the library, as well as addressing some children's safety issues as well.
So to be clear, this includes three exits, redoing the first entry and then parent and the children emergency exits?
You are correct.
Okay, not just a single. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Christine.
Go ahead, Member Russell.
Thank you. And then also on the city-wide facilities energy efficiency projects, there is 1.5 million coming from somewhere. Did you?
From the general fund unassigned fund balance.
Okay, so we still, then the 1 million, so it's 2.5 million. 1 million would come from the capital projects fund?
No, it would fund the capital projects fund, the $2.5 million capital request for the energy efficient programs.
Okay, but
or
we only,
projects, excuse me.
but we only have 1.5 million, right?
Right, and the difference between that 2.5 and the 1.5 is we already have $200,000 of ARPA money set aside for this project, and then we just received that $750,000 grant.
Okay, all right, that explains that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Member Prang?
Thank you. I don't have really further comment on this, but more of a procedural question, I guess, of staff. Do we, once we approve this list of projects, are there specific times during the year where we get an update specific to this list? Like some of the areas, you know, on the prioritization list are pretty broad. So like, is there a point in the year where we're having a specific presentation that says, here's the amount of money that was approved, here are the projects that we've started or completed, and just get a status update to that, so that I'm just thinking in my second year as a council member and trying to wrap my head around all of this, being able to be responsive to, you know, questions that we might get on some of these specific asks.
Thank you for the question, Member Prang. It's an excellent suggestion. I don't know why we haven't thought of this sooner, but it's an excellent idea. We do this internally. Is it monthly or quarterly? Quarterly, where we have all of the project managers for all the different projects come and report in. We make adjustments. Sometimes that requires budget amendments that would go to council, but there isn't actually a check-in. So I think we would be happy to do that as a mid-year, maybe check-in, first of the year, in the middle of the year check-in.
Yeah, I think a mid-year would be wonderful, just so that we have a sense of where we're at on the use of these funds. And
Yeah, I think it would actually
can be
make
a lot to
us.
digest, so I
Agreed.
think the public would appreciate hearing that update as well.
Yes, absolutely. And you'll learn a little bit. I'm going to be reporting on some kind of major project updates that we are starting to do for some of our citizen groups in the community that will be made available for anyone. But they'll address some of these, but not all. And so to your point, I think it would really help staff to be more tuned in to exactly where we are on these projects. And I think it would be helpful for council to understand what the successes and failures are as we move through these. So if that's all right with the rest of council, I don't want to take direction from one, but it seems like a really good suggestion to me. So, okay, thanks.
Member Noonan-Camp?
+1, I think it's a wonderful idea. I wish we would have thought of it a long time ago. I just had one other thought, because we're looking at the general fund budget and the capital request budget holistically tonight. Director Rochelle brought up the point of there's a lot of public works items on this CIP list. City Manager, what's your confidence that with the existing public works staffing, if we were to fund all of these projects, we could accomplish them?
You should just have a seat up here tonight.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Member Noonan-Camp. I'd really prefer that Director Rochelle answer that.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. A lot of what you see on the list there are programs, especially in the top list. So we're already doing those. So with the current staffing levels, we are confident we can accomplish all the things that you see on the list for Public Works. Of course, we will have some outside consultants on a couple things, the citywide transportation plan, things of that nature. But our programs, our team are already doing. These are ongoing programs that have gone on for a few years, perhaps, depending on the program specifically. And we use outside contractors, and then we just manage the contractor to get the work done in the field.
Very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Member Prang, light still on, or you're good? All right. Sorry, I thought I moved away from you from your initial question. All right, I don't see any further questions. Ms. Nolan, Mr. Engels, thank you very much for the presentation. Mr. Rochelle for coming up and speaking, and all the staff for providing their guidance on the budget. I know we still have more work to do, and we'll have a public hearing. Well, actually, is there any additional steps before the public hearing on the budget? Does it come in front of us one more time, or?
Well, the proposed document, we hope to have printed and online for citizens' review by September 3rd. So
Okay.
if the direction is tonight to go ahead with option 2, we'll provide you with a proposed budget to that level. Same with the capital improvement fund capital request. If the direction is to go ahead with what we've provided you tonight, we'll include that in the proposed budget document.
Yeah.
But we're
So-
basically needing direction.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nolan. So I think the difficult thing is that we only have 5 council members here tonight, so we may provide direction, but I think we had 3 on option 2, if I remember correctly. So we don't technically have a majority, but we have 3. Well, we don't have 4 at least in terms of budget. I think I'm fine moving forward with option 2 at this point, but knowing that it could potentially change with a full council. Is there any other direction that is still unclear at this point in terms of anything else that we discussed tonight?
I think I'm okay. I don't.
Nope, I think that's what we need for tonight.
Right. Go ahead, Member Noonekamp.
The only thing I would add, and I'm only one voice, and I know we'll talk about this again, but when I'm looking at all of these things, if we went with option 1, hypothetically, and we took 100,000 out of what we're asking from the general fund or from the unassigned fund balance, and then we look at the CIP projects, we have, because how much is any of the CIP also leaning on unassigned fund balance? How much of it?
1.5.
1.5. I look at like the carpet, I look at, on the tier 3 furniture replacement, some of those things. I would rather remove those and put those into getting some of the traffic calming work done faster. I would rather see a new crosswalk on Oxford than new carpet in this building. So those are some of the changes that I would support if there's council support. So those are some things that maybe staff can look at the feasibility before we talk about this again.
Thank you, Member Noonekamp. I would be in support of that, but I'm also trying to be mindful of the question that you had earlier for Member Rochelle, because I think any additional enhancement that go to traffic calming, I think does play a bigger, or does take bandwidth from your staff. So I'd be fine with those changes if Public Works comes back to us and says, yes, we can handle that additional work. Member Ward.
As a frequent user of the furniture in the library, I strongly support the replacement of the furniture in the library.
Thank you, Member Ward. Yes, I appreciate that. I'm not sure if we'll be able to provide enough guidance on that regard, just because we don't have the 7 members, but I think there may be some potential, there is a chance that there are potential modifications, small items to the actual budget itself, if we get the 7 members all together. So just wanted to point that out, Ms. Nolan, but is there anything else?
I would just ask the question, so do you want us to put this back on an agenda?
Well, there's only 5 members here. So yes, I think that it probably would be best for us to just hammer it out one last time, go over what we've kind of given direction on, and just stick to those specific points. And we don't need 90 minutes for that, so.
Okay.
Member Ward.
Okay, since it's coming back, I do have to note one other reservation, which is over PC replacement. $125,000 annually for PC replacement. I'm just hearkening back to when I worked for the state. I had a little box on my desk, and it served all of my applications as software. Hardware wasn't supported in the same manner that we do it here. So I'm wondering what the case is for spending $125,000 every year for PC replacement. I know that they're on a cycle, But I also know that we have some employees who only use their PCs to check email, for instance. And a PC that was built in 2010 can do that. So I'm not sure what the use case is for that. And if we're looking at trimming, that would be a place where I would look.
I was gonna say, I could let IT speak to that, but I think there might be security concerns with having older PCs, but go ahead, City Manager Lewis, but.
Well, I certainly don't want to speak to the technical side of the question, but I think between that one and the carpet question that was asked before, we're glad to provide more information or see if we can potentially scale those back. Are there any other areas here, since it sounds like we're going to come back to you, are there any other ones that you want us to look at the impacts of scaling down or up funding as well? Because ultimately, you know, as the boards and commissions look at this, as staff looks at this is your CIP plan. So these are helpful questions and comments, but we just want to make sure if there are other things that we are covering those topics.
I don't think so. I think, not from my perspective at least. I think what Member Noonan-Kemp has brought up, but also the fact that Member Ward brought up a counterpoint to that as well. I think those are the only items that I see. I don't see anything else. But if members of council have anything else that they want us possibly look at for the next study session, go ahead, Member Noonan-Kemp.
Sure. I just want to be clear. My statements about the general area furniture, not the library furniture. Those are two different line items. Common area furniture, excuse me. And then I had a question around line 34. It's street lights and furniture repair /replacement. Those two things together seem odd to me. Can I get clarity on what that line item is?
So line 31.
Yes, Councilmember Noonan-Kemp, I can speak to that. So the city does own some streetlights, particularly along Englewood Parkway and along Broadway. And there's also some furniture in there that the city owns and maintains. Streetlights are damaged typically in one of two ways: vehicles leaving the road due to whatever reason, either accidents or distracted driving. And then we also have, I'll say, damage to lights where components inside the lights are taken because they're thought to be valuable, wiring, et cetera. And then the street furniture also typically gets vandalized sometimes, and also just needs replacement from day-to-day use.
And those are mostly benches and trash receptacles, correct?
Correct, thank you.
That makes more sense. I was on a very internal furniture mindset. That's helpful. I support keeping that in. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, anything else? City Manager Lewis, that provided more clarity on our next. And so we'll try to get that on the study session for 2 weeks from tonight.
Sounds good, thank you.
Yep, all right, that works. All right, well, thank you very much, Ms. Nolan, Mr. Engels, for the presentation. Thanks to all of staff for that as well. We're going to take a 10-minute break. Are we good with the 10-minute break? And come back at 8:05 and continue the rest of the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. We are now back. There we go. Can you hear me? All right, perfect. All right, everyone, we are back. We're moving on to agenda item 4. This is the June 2024 monthly financial report for the month of June. Mr. Engels, passing it back to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Kevin Engels, Director of Finance again. Yes, we're going to talk about the June 2024 General Fund Monthly Report. So through June this year, we are at just under 50%. That's and 50% of the year is passed, so we're right on track. So, about the same percentage as last year. Here's the breakdown. Once again, we already talked about sales and use tax, but yeah, that trend continues. We are flattening. Don't have the report until 2 weeks, the July report, but we do have the sales tax numbers for July, and that trend continues in July. So we're still seeing flat revenues. Licenses and permits. Last year was a good year for permits. This year, we don't have many big projects going, so that's why there's a difference there. You'll notice that we are at about what we budgeted, though, so it's not a surprise. Fines are up from last year. Really not too much else going on this slide. Overall, we're up about 5.5%. A lot of that is property tax. We did receive a $300,000 backfill from the state. Potentially there is backfill for 2024. We haven't heard how that's going to play out yet, though. Expenditures were a little below budget at 47.3%. That's a little bit less than last year. So here are the specific line items. City manager, that's the addition of the sustainability program, division, excuse me. IT, once again, they pay a lot of their one-time costs at the beginning of the year. So, and you'll see last year, we were still looking a little above budget. That tends to flatten out as we get toward the end of the year. Fire and emergency management, we pay that a month in advance, so that's not over budget. I think the other one we've had questions before about is debt service. There's a principal payment once a year, and so that flattens out as we go throughout the year as well. By category, everything below budget except contractual services. Once again, IT has a lot of contractual services that are paid at the beginning of the year. Other departments do too. All yearly maintenance typically happens at the beginning of the year. And capital, we just have a few fewer vehicle replacements. So operating surplus or deficit, we are at about a $1.3 million surplus for the year. From the earlier presentation, we are expecting that to come down to about a break-even point toward the end of the year. There's your transfers for this year, about $4.5 million to capital. And once again, since 2019, $22 million for capital projects. Fund balance composition. Started the year at just under 25 million. Net impact of operations and transfers is to reduce fund balance by about 3 million. Then you've got your restrictions for Tabor. Still have a small amount in long-term asset reserve. ARPA commitments still a little bit out there to spend in the general fund, and a little bit still in the stadium district restricted for youth activities. So maintaining that 16.7% reserve, that's about 12 million. And for overall unassigned fund balance of about 7 million. Once again, these are mid-year estimates. We do estimate that unassigned fund balance coming down to around 5, like we saw in the earlier presentation. The rest are area sales tax slides by area, and I won't go through those unless there are specific questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Engels. Any questions from council? Go ahead, Member Russell.
I just have one question. Are we behind? Don't normally we have July's report the 1st of August? Or is it the end of the month usually?
Well, we'll be back in 2 weeks with the July report. It was just a matter of getting on the agenda. It is a couple of weeks later than normally it would be.
All right, thank you. I think everything looks fine.
All right. All right, Mr. Engels, thank you very much for the presentation on June, and we'll be speaking in a couple of weeks on July. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to agenda item 4, we have our city attorney, Tamara Niles, here to provide an overview of the city home rule authority. I know a few council members have asked us to bring this to a study session, obviously at least 4. So city attorney Niles, when you're ready. You're getting the boot, Mr. Engels, so.
Yes, would you mind just passing down the remote?
Oh, you just needed the clicker?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Thank
I
you.
was curious if you were going to try to move to the front, so.
It's nice to sit in my own seat during a presentation. So we were asked to present on a description of what is home rule. And home rule is our form of government that authorizes us to make our own laws. And a home rule city is, in comparison to a statutory city, that a statutory city exists under state law. They follow all the rules in statute. As a home rule city, we can make our own rules often, but not always. So this presentation will go into when we can exercise that home rule authority and when we can't. We do have the power to legislate upon some specific matters delineated under state law, including municipal officers, municipal courts, fines, penalties, etc. And now our home rule charter, which was adopted by our citizens in the 50s, contains several provisions regarding the authority that we do have under that home rule charter. Section 3 rather, states that we will have all powers and functions of all municipalities except if it's prohibited to home rule corporations and cities by the Constitution or statutes of the state of Colorado. In addition, our section number 9 refers to the constitutionality of laws and that the state constitution shall supersede the charter if it's of statewide concern. And so I already previewed this. We'll talk about the authority that we have under the Colorado Constitution, as well as what it means for matters of statewide concern, local concern, and then when there's mixed local and state concern. So Colorado Constitution Article 20, Section 6 is on home rule. It specifically says that home rule municipalities shall have the following authorities over the following matters. And it provides a specific list. I won't repeat them here, but that is the list that's contained within the Colorado Constitution. But then the question comes, what if there's a conflict between state law and our home rule authority? Perhaps we have adopted an ordinance that then conflicts with state law. Then it goes to the courts to decide. And the courts will consider whether state law should prevail or local law when they conflict by providing a multitude of factors as listed here. Now, it's already been established there are some matters of statewide concern, which include beer and liquor regulation, electrical contractors, telephone companies, general labor laws, unemployment compensation, all matters provided by state law. Public safety can be a matter of statewide concern. For example, DUI specifically, we do not have authority to prosecute DUI in municipal court. That's a matter of statewide concern in the state of Colorado. Interestingly, in other states, it's not. I was a DUI prosecutor in Kansas. I was a local concern. And then there's state statutes which identify an issue as being exclusive under the authority of state legislation. Now, that's not always upheld by courts, and that's when courts may apply that, the test to determine which law would apply. Now, on matters of mixed state and local concern, sorry about that. The home rule municipality has concurrent jurisdiction, which means the state may have a law on it, but that means the city can adopt a law on it too. So generally, we can't conflict with the state law when it's mixed state and local concern. And generally, though, we can make our local law more strict. So as an example, the state, this session, which at the end of July, I sent out council a spreadsheet of all the new state laws. There was a law passed on emissions from idling vehicles. And that state law specifically said this is a matter of mixed state and local concern. So while we are legislating this at the state level, cities, you can also adopt an ordinance on it. It just can't be less restrictive than this law. So somewhat unusual for the statute to specifically say that. But I don't know if you've gone through the extensive spreadsheet yet, but it's in there. So the current trend of Colorado courts is to recognize more issues implicating both state and local interests, meaning that cities can legislate on it even if the state has. We just can't conflict with the state legislation. I previewed this already too, jumped the gun on it. Just because the state says it's statewide concern or mixed concern doesn't necessarily mean that it is. Generally, we give it deference, and as the city attorney's office, we generally recommend that we don't adopt any laws that directly conflict with state law if we can avoid it. But there is the test, and just because the legislature says it's one way or the other doesn't necessarily mean that it is. And here's some specific examples that have been found to be mixed state and local concern. Hospitals licensing and regulation, meaning we can legislate on it as well. Affordable housing, although that seems to be transitioning more to statewide concern. City assets that are outside of our municipal jurisdiction. Police and fire pensions, for example, there's state law on FPPA, the Fire Police Pension Association, which I'm actually presenting to NERP on that tomorrow. So there's state law on it, but we also have municipal code on it that we may consider amending depending on what NERP decides tomorrow night. Juvenile prosecution, there's state laws on it. We also have local laws on it. Now, in matters of local concern, as a home rule municipality, this is our bread and butter. If it is a matter strictly of local concern, we can clearly adopt laws on it through ordinances or, of course, amend our charter to address them as well. In which case, if it's a matter of strictly local concern, then we supersede any other state law on it. And just because the state adopts a law doesn't necessarily mean it's applicable to us, because home rule municipality versus statutory municipality. Statutory municipality, all those statutes are applicable to them. So local concern matters include civil litigation, zoning, how we just had the Code Next project that was a multi-year project for our land use code. That is a matter of strictly local concern. Sale of our own property, if we exercise eminent domain, that is clearly within our local concern. We can adopt our own laws on it, on how we do it, when we want to do it. Subject to some regulations under state law, including things like paying relocation benefits, which can be a matter of federal law if we accept federal money for a project. Also, capital improvements and equipment are solely within our concern. A council member Prang had asked me before the presentation tonight if I could give an example of when this impacts us. Could I give a real world example of this? And I will refer back to that spreadsheet that I provided of all the new state laws. So one of the new state laws adopted in the 2024 session stated that no city may adopt a definition of household in our land use code for based on familial relationships. And so And if you'd like me to give you that site, I'm happy to do it. Oh, in fact, I have it pulled up. House Bill 24-10007 prohibits residential occupancy limits. And it specifically prohibits local governments from enacting or enforcing residential occupancy limits based on familial relationships. But it does allow us to implement residential occupancy limits based on health and safety standards, like fire code, parking, sewer capabilities, that sort of thing. So in response to that, then I have it on my list to review our new Title 16 and our definition of household to ensure our definition of household does not conflict with that state law, as well as an analysis to determine, does the state have authority to do this? Is this a matter of statewide concern that would actually prohibit us from doing this? So it's a two-part analysis. So if we determined that, yes, the state did have authority to exercise statewide jurisdiction, it's a matter of statewide concern, then we will then look at our definition. If we determine our definition is required to be amended to comply with this statewide law, then we would bring it to council with a recommendation for a modification. That's not exactly true because it's in Title 16. Title 16, we would first bring it to P&Z. Planning and Zoning Commission, and then we would bring it to City Council. We have had discussions in the past where we brought such recommendations to City Council to say, we think this is a matter of statewide concern and we think we don't have authority to legislate. In certain circumstances, City Council has decided not to move forward, not to amend our code. I believe the last time we did that, it was regarding false reports for cruelty to animals. It's been a while now. In that case, we decided not to make a change to municipal code, knowing that potentially if challenged, it wouldn't be enforceable. So with that, I would welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, City Attorney Niles. Member Russell, kick us off.
Thank you. You know, you said earlier, generally, we can make our law more strict. Just because the state says we can't base it on familial law, if we wanted to fight that, we could, right? I mean, we could challenge it in court.
Potentially. That's actually a fairly complicated analysis to a short question. If it's a matter of statewide concern, that means we can't change it. We have to follow state law. If it's mixed statewide and local concern, then we could make our law more strict. But we couldn't conflict with the state law, but we could supplement it, if you will. Only if it's a matter of purely local concern could we then completely conflict with state law. So I would want to, like I said, do that analysis. Is this a matter of statewide concern? There is kind of a shift that affordable housing is a matter of statewide concern within the state of Colorado, but I still have to do that analysis.
Okay, and then I know one of the reasons that this came up, why do we need to change the general penalty clause? If we can make our laws stricter, if it is of local concern to us, why would we have to change it? And along with that question, is there current litigation in any cities? I think you said there was some litigation moving forward, challenging that also.
Yes. So we still have to comply with state and federal constitution on that specific issue regarding our sentencing limits. We can't violate the 14th Amendment, which is the equal protection under the laws. And that was the challenge to cities that imposed a higher penalty for the same action that could be imposed by state court. If there's equal protection under the law, then why can I go to city court and get a fine of $1,000, but go to state court and the maximum they'll impose is only $200? So the argument is it's not equal protection, that if if a police officer doesn't like me, they could send me to municipal court knowing I'd get a harsher sentence than someone that would be sent to district court. So that's kind of the crux of that argument, is that it is a constitutional violation. At the time we originally brought that ordinance forward, there were challenges pending in various courts, but I haven't updated that research. I will before we bring that ordinance back if council wants me to bring it back.
Okay. Thank you. That's it for now.
Member Ward.
Some time ago, I looked through the case law on home rule, and one of the interesting cases not cited in your presentation is actually an Englewood case directly regarding zoning. But the Telluride case that you cited occurs after the Englewood case. So my question for you is perhaps one of legal nuance, but do you believe that the findings in the cases that you cited undermine Englewood's zoning authority as it relates to home rule, despite the fact that the Supreme Court has a much earlier decision that explicitly states that matters related to zoning are matters of home rule and therefore constitutionally protected for the city?
I would like to research that specific question. I wasn't prepared to, I was prepared with some general information about what home rule is. But if it's fine with you, I'd like to give you a legal opinion on that as authorized by municipal code. Municipal code says I will give a legal opinion upon request of any city council member. So I would like to do that rather than just give a response on the fly that could end up being incorrect.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in that because I think it's particularly relevant considering the behavior that our current General Assembly has engaged in the past regarding essentially attempting to revoke home rule authority relative to certain zoning provisions. It's of great concern to me, and I'll waste my last breath trying to protect home rule when it comes to our ability to regulate land use in the city.
I will add that I have seen a shift, not just in zoning. I was a city attorney in Kansas for home rule municipality for 14 years before I came here. Same is true in the state of Kansas, and I suspect many other states that legislatures tend to try to expand their authority and thereby reduce home rule authority. And that's why just because the legislature says this is a matter of statewide concern doesn't necessarily mean it's a matter of statewide concern. And home rule municipalities do challenge that and they do win. That's one factor to consider, but it doesn't, it's not a, I was going to say an act of Congress, but it is, but it's not completely definitive.
Thank you.
Any other questions from members of council? Go ahead, Member Pring.
Thank you. So what determines what is a statewide concern? Like, what is the threshold, or who determines it? Is it, because earlier you mentioned that affordable housing is increasingly becoming more of a statewide concern. So is it that we're seeing more legislation driven on a statewide level that brings more focus to an issue? Can you talk that through for me?
Yes, generally the legislature says it is, and then we go from there to determine if it actually is. And I would say, I don't mean to question their authority, and generally I think they're correct when they say in their legislative declarations that this is a matter of statewide concern. I'd say generally it is, and generally it is upheld. But just because they say that doesn't mean we have to accept it. That if we think otherwise, we can certainly challenge that. Yeah, but I think when in saying that, it's the legislature has started designating that like in this household definition. I think the thought process behind that is if we don't tie it to familial relationships, then perhaps more people could live in a home and thereby reduce the need for additional housing in the state of Colorado. So I'm just seeing some comments made during the legislative session from our legislators, as well as these statements of legislative declaration where they're saying it is statewide concern.
Member Russell.
Thank you. So with things like murder, be statewide concerns? Major crimes, are those generally statewide and would be charged and go to a higher court than municipal court?
Yes, but I can't tell you with 100% certainty that the legislature has said that as a legislative declaration. Instead, they say municipal courts do not have jurisdiction over felonies, and these are felonies. So they're saying that these can only be in state court, which would be murder and those much more serious crimes.
Well, just out of curiosity, I actually was on a jury in municipal court, and it was for murder. This has been years ago. Is that fairly new?
I don't have the legislative history on that, but I can certainly look it up and tell you.
I don't spend a whole lot of time, but I just wondered if it's more things like that. And I guess, so, and this is just an example, this isn't necessarily what I believe and want to fight something, but if we decided that we wanted people to be related familial, there has been an argument in the past that there was less crime committed when there were family relationships. And I know that has changed over the years. But if it was a safety issue, is that something that the municipality would have authority over, or?
Possibly. We have what's called police powers reserved to the city, which are for health, welfare, and safety, although some of those are of statewide concern. So possibly safety of inhabitants. I know I at one point prosecuted domestic violence, and I can tell you there can be some unsafe situations with family members as well. So I think that would be an obstacle to us if we said they can only be family members. Well, that doesn't necessarily provide a safe environment.
Okay, but let's say on some other thing, if we felt that it impacted the safety of the community, our home rule authority would rule over that, perhaps, not necessarily in that case.
Yeah, we would certainly have an argument.
Okay, thank you.
Member Ward.
I'll try to keep this particular rant brief, but in reference to Member Prank's question about what concerns a matter of statewide concern, I'm of the opinion that it's a legislative power grab, very much similar to tacking on the safety clause to prevent residents or citizens of the state who disagree with the legislation from circulating a referendum petition when it may not necessarily actually be on its face related to the immediate safety, which is what the constitutional standard is. The legislature has been known to tack on safety clauses just on pieces of legislation they like, but they know are controversial. Similarly, a matter of statewide concern, in my opinion, is the state legislature's means of asserting their authority over everyone in the state, regardless of whether or not it actually does matter to someone in Boulder the same as it matters to someone in Grand Junction or in Englewood. So that's just one man's opinion, but I've observed many a legislative session, and that's how I view it.
Any further questions or comments from members of council? All right, City Attorney Niles, thank you very much for that overview. Very informative, thank you.
If I could receive some direction on that prior ordinance that we presented regarding maximum penalties, would council like to see that brought back, or should we just table it indefinitely unless you request it later?
Any feedback from members of council?
I would like to table it indefinitely. I think there's some other problems, but if we want to bring it forward, I'll address those other problems at the time. And actually, could we, if there is desire to move it forward, could we get information on the litigation that's out there before we would move forward?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. I know when we brought it last time, at least one city requested that we not publicly announce that they were involved in it. But I'm happy to
Look for it.
up. They didn't want it broadcast, I don't think.
Okay, I don't want you to broadcast, but I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Member Ward?
Perhaps in contrast to what I just said, this is one area where I do favor bringing it forward again. I'm compelled by the equal protection argument, and so I would like to see us adjust accordingly.
Thank you, Member Ward. I too would like to see it come forward. Potentially, Member Prang's shaking her head yes. Member Newcamp, yes as well. So that's 4 at least for tonight. Go ahead, Member Russell.
In which case, I would like to make certain that if we end up moving forward with that, in order to save the court some time, that we need to look at general policies and things that we want in the same bucket and advise on that, so we don't put pressure on the court to have to follow all of state law. Because each thing would be different, and I'm pretty sure there's probably a lot more state laws than we have in the municipal, or we need to come up with a way to do it that would not put extra pressure on the court.
I did actually ask Assistant City Attorney Sergio Renteria about that, because he was a former assistant district attorney that would make sentencing recommendations to the state court. So he did prosecute the same offenses when there's concurrent jurisdiction. He prosecuted them in district court, and I asked him how complicated it was. He said there's a one-page sentencing guideline that has a base sentence and fine based on the offense, with then guidelines for up and down. So he thought it would be a one-page thing that our court could follow as well. That's the same guidance that they use in district court.
Okay, and I actually think that this is something perhaps that the court ought to weigh in on also, and what they would like to see. Perhaps we need to have a study session and get the court to come and talk to us about that also.
I did forward it to the judge and Municipal Court Administrator Kenetha Julian. They did give me some comments back and didn't object to bringing it forward, but I'm happy to schedule whatever council would like and invite them to come.
That would be great.
Actually, I'll just ask council now, would we want to have a study session with the court on this, or is it enough? Me personally, I would just like to, if there was any feedback, if that's something that you could provide us, I'd like to see that, or make it part of the agenda packet for that evening, have it as that item. I'm not sure if we need to have a study session specifically on this item, but I'll let other members of council weigh in as well. Go ahead, Member Nunenkamp.
I'm happy to see that handled at a staff level, and have that communicated in the council communication to us.
Member Ward?
If we do have the court in for a study session, I would like the person who comes to speak to council to be someone who is actively making these decisions. Ms. Julian is not a judge. She does not make sentencing decisions. If the judge wants to come, or he wants to send one of the associate judges to come talk to council about the complications of this, I'm fine with that. But I don't see any need to have Ms. Julian come in and speak on the judge's behalf.
Thank you, Member Ward. Member Prang?
I think I'd be happy to just have it attached to the agenda.
Okay. All right. Anything else, City Attorney Niles or members of council? All right. Perfect. Well, thank you again, City Attorney Niles, for that information. And we are going to move to reports from boards and commissions. Anyone have anything today? I have something very quick just because I haven't gotten around to it, but late last month, the EDDA met. We are going through our budgeting process as well, so we took a good amount of time on that. We also had a couple of updates on the marketing and programming. In second week of July, second Saturday, there was a patio party that was put on by the businesses on South Broadway. There was another business on Hampton that also took part as well, but it was a very successful event. I know that the EDDA provided some of the marketing on that, but great job by a lot of the business to, for a slower time of year, they were able to get a lot of people in on a hot day to just participate with happy hours or, with any establishment that basically had a patio. So first year for it, and it was very successful. I'm not sure if people have been right off of, is it Gerard? Gerard and South Broadway near, just behind on the east side of the road, there's a, basically the flower pop installations that went in at the beginning of July. That happened in July. There's going to be an enhancement to that on the Paseo for the Englewood Block Party. So just a lot of programming that's going on, and just additional art that the EDDA is looking to program for this. So that was the major updates on that. And so, yeah, EDDA will be coming in front of us here next month to talk about the budget. So those are just the major things that we covered during the EDDA meeting last month. Anyone else? Member Ward?
Just a quick report on the Region 9 Opioid Abatement Task Force meeting that took place last week. We met here, Englewood hosted. The meeting was slightly plagued by some technical gremlins, but we managed to limp our way through it with the help of staff and a group of people who were willing to roll with the punches. So we were up in Pikes Peak in the city council, our city manager's conference room up there. And it was a productive meeting. We're starting to allocate some extra funds that are coming in with new settlements over the course of the next 2 years. Prior to that meeting, we also met, a small group of us met at a proposed treatment facility at Monaco and Bellevue, or Bellevue and I-25, roughly. It's on the Denver side of the Denver-Greenwood Village border, and it was formerly a assisted living facility, and they're converting it to a roughly 60 or 70 bed short-term treatment facility, roughly 30 days of substance use treatment. But one of the big features there is that it will potentially allow for direct drop-off. The company that's opening this facility also has a treatment facility at Porter Hospital that can take people in for detox. So the potential here is that our police department or other police departments in the region or Denver Health or other organizations could drop off someone who is actively using and in some sort of crisis or medical state where they would not normally be accepted by a facility. They can do the full intake at that location and then transfer them out to a facility where they can get immediate treatment, which is one of the big gaping holes in the system right now. So it has some great potential. It was mostly a group of law enforcement. I believe I may have been the only politician actually present at this meeting, but we were able to review some of the law enforcement needs while we were talking to the group that is building the facility so that it will be more usable for transferring people immediately into treatment. It's looking really great, and I believe that the commission or the task force will be looking at allocating some of Arapahoe County's funding. It may also be eligible potentially for some of the state pool, which would be also very helpful. And there were also some representatives from Douglas County there as well. So it would be an actual regional amenity, Denver, Arapahoe County, and Douglas County, all benefiting from this new facility. Looks great.
Thank you very much, Member Ward. Member Noonekamp.
The Cultural Arts Commission met last Wednesday. A couple updates from them. They continue to be plagued with CDOT challenges in installing public art in our medians. You may have seen that there is a new public art sculpture actually down in the amphitheater. It's called Can't Pin Me Down. It has the push pins through the cloud. It was meant to go in a median, and we ultimately had to put it somewhere else because CDOT would not approve it. So that project just continues to be an incredible challenge working with our partners at the state, so much so that the commission is considering just scrapping it and having alternative plans or putting them somewhere else. But Hampton, because it's controlled by CDOT, just continues to be a real challenge. Other art installations that they're looking at this year is the signal wraps, the utility boxes, doing more wraps on those. So they approved, I think, about a half a dozen designs for those boxes that will be coming soon. They're really leaning into a lot of bright colors, those kinds of things. And we also saw the art installation from the Downtown Development Authority. They shared some photos of that, which looks fantastic. And they're continuing to consider what's the right vision for that group. What kind of public art do they want to see in the community? How are they making their decisions? What kind of calls for artists are they doing as they continue to cultivate public art and cultural art in Englewood? So that's what they're up to.
All right, Member Pring.
Thank you. Actually, Parks and Rec was supposed to meet last Thursday and got canceled due to lack of quorum. But I did have an update from Director Underhill that same evening, there was a community meeting regarding the Centennial Bike Park that came out of the overall package for the Go Bond ask. Just wanted to update the group that conversations about that are still moving forward with the intent of securing grant funds. And that there has been a survey released to solicit more community input. I haven't had a chance to follow up with Director Underhill on how many people showed up for that community meeting. I'm guessing that's why we're now seeing a survey, but I'm glad to see that option is still out there and that we're pursuing community input on that.
Thank you, Member Pring. All right, anything else? All right, moving on to council members' choice. Anyone have anything to add? Go ahead, Member Ward.
You all may have noticed an email from CML regarding a conference or a meeting of the whatever region we're in for CML in Cherry Hills Village. There's a $40 fee for that. I am very interested in attending that particular meeting and overall increasing the city's participation in CML activities. So I want to check with this body for permission to attend that on behalf of the city and for permission to get a $40 check from the manager's office to pay Cherry Hills Village for whatever turkey dinner we're getting or whatever it is.
That's fine with me, Member Ward. I don't think there's any disagreement with that. All right. Anyone else? If not, oh, go ahead, Member Pring.
Yes. One, I wanted to extend some thanks to the Parks and Public Works teams that went out and did the cleanup underneath 285 in Broadway. Looks like they moved quite a lot of debris out of there, and it's a small fix, but makes a big difference. There's a ton of people that travel through there, and they did a lot of work. So I just wanted to personally thank them for that. Also, just wanted to highlight that I did participate in National Night Out this year. I need to learn from fellow council members how to manage time because I only got to one of them, and it was my local one. But I really enjoyed like having that time to just be in the community and talk to some of my neighbors, but also had the opportunity to meet some really cool high schoolers that serve on one of the rescue teams, and just such lovely young, youth that participate in such vital efforts throughout the county, and just really articulate and excited to talk to the adults that were there and share their experiences. So it was a really great first year for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Pring. All right, City Manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a little different update tonight that requires some action by City Council. And this is really due to an emergent item that's been made official as of today. So as all of you know, Severe Weather Shelter Network is a nonprofit organization that for years, many years, has been providing congregate shelter, mostly in churches, for in certain weather conditions in the winter. October 1st through the April 30th is their general season, 20 degrees below and dry, 32 degrees and below with moisture. We really have to have projections, forecasts more than 3 hours in advance. They have undoubtedly saved lots of lives by keeping people from freezing on the streets, which has happened in Englewood and has not since we changed our city code and allowed severe weather sheltering to use some of our churches, some other churches in other communities in the Tri-Cities and elsewhere. Unfortunately, we received official word today that organization is no longer going to be providing shelter. So we had heard this a little bit more or less third hand during our Tri-Cities Policy Committee meeting, which is online. You can watch from last week when Hatforce presented that they had been approached by, and if you don't know, Hatforce also does sheltering, but they use a hotel voucher program under similar conditions as severe weather sheltering. They were approached by Severe Weather Shelter and were asked to provide, to take their basically actually their client list, which is increased in, I think, in terms of pre-registrations by about 40 individuals that Severe Weather Sheltering was expecting to need shelter this winter. So Hat Force has put together a very draft budget, which I think we received in the last day or so. And we have got that if you have specific questions about that. But specifically, Hat Force is asking the county for, I think it's 118, they need $150,000 total to operate the program with their model throughout the season. And they are going to the Arapahoe County Board of Commissioners later this month for approximately $113,000 of that. So they're looking to the Tri-Cities for about $37,000 to kind of make up the difference. That would be really for supplies, food, program costs, administration costs for doing this work, and they are asking that from Tri-Cities. We have, as you probably know, budgeted $350,000 towards the action plan portion of the Tri-Cities Homelessness Policy Committee. So the action plan is really our guide. It was passed unanimously by all three councils, and it's our guide for how we fund and work with Tri-Cities and the work that they do and the action steps that they take. Towards that plan, we allocated $350,000 from Englewood. That was all using ARPA dollars. We have a couple of line items. Much of that has been spent already since we're in year 3 now of that. But we've got some line items, the Lived Advisory Board, Experience Board. We've also got the volunteer program, some fundraising efforts that Tri-Cities was going to do. Those are under budget. So we would like to, per the request of Hat Force, get consensus from you all to allocate $5,000 just as seed money so that they can at least hire the program administrators to start putting together the program, with the expectation that they'll be getting other funds from other sources. Deputy City Manager Dodd was on the telephone today with Littleton. Littleton has also committed $5,000, and then we expect for Sheridan to kick in some portion as well, but we haven't gotten in touch with them. So I'm sure you'll have questions about this. It's a little unorthodox, but again, official word received today from Severe Weather Shelter Network. I think most of their staff has been laid off, but someone in the organization has reached out to us with that official notification and would like to get council's feedback on using, again, budgeted funds, but for this specific purpose.
Thank you, Manager Lewis. Go ahead, Member Russell.
Can we wait to see if they get a response from Arapahoe County?
We can. What they have passed along to us, and Deputy City Manager Dodd can probably weigh in, is that that's going to be later in the month, and the funding will not come quickly in terms of when they actually get their check. And so they're really kind of coming to us in Littleton to say, can you help us with the first couple of paychecks to get the staffing that we're going to need in place in order to run the program? So they're calling it a seed donation. Deputy City Manager Dodd, can you?
Yeah, so it's right now scheduled to go before the County Board of Commissioners on September 9th, and the county has told them that if it is approved on that day, they'll get it by mid-October. But as City Manager Lewis said, that's, a month or so or 2 months before probably the first, it's hard to know even like when the first cold weather snap is going to be. And so they're really looking for a little money now to basically hire a program coordinator and to start the process of planning for the winter.
Thank you. I have some questions because what I have heard is that 5280 got thrown under the bus in that meeting, and that's a little bit problematic to me. I think that somebody coming forward at the last minute asking for money when we already have somebody out there that is working on similar things, I'm not so sure that I think we should be in a hurry to come up with that $5,000. I think we need to wait and see where the county's going to go with this also.
Member Noonan-Camp?
My understanding is that there is no one else who's doing this kind of sheltering. Is that correct, City Manager?
Well, to Member Russell's point, I have been working to connect the Fire Marshal's office here in Englewood with Movement 5280 to get their building ready for that. They have not yet applied for the permit, and I think mistakenly kind of asked the Hat Force person during the Tri-Cities meeting a difficult question about how does Movement 5280 fit into this, and there was some question about that. And so I apologize for any confusion that I caused in that discussion. But they have indicated that they intend to provide those services. What was explained to me during the Tri-Cities meeting is that that would be more overflow. I have not heard that term from Movement 5280, but in our check-in meetings that Tim and I and Emily Van Hake in the police department have with 5280, they have indicated that they plan on providing some sort of severe weather sheltering.
That's helpful. Thank you. Well, we've obviously had these conversations in the past. Sad to hear about Severe Weather Shelter Network. We have to have these partners because we cannot do this work on our own in the city. So I strongly support working with a partner who's ready and willing now. And then if there are more partners who become available later, working with them as well. But for the relatively low cost investment and the opportunity to have a new partner for this, that we can get ahead of this, I absolutely support it.
Member Prang?
Does the severe weather sheltering include the excessive heat situations that we've been facing recently?
Well, we have a committee that's working on that specifically for heat and developing those guidelines that can be shared across multiple agencies. But our community does have that now through the library, through the rec center, and through the Malley Center. So we have that really in place. What we're trying to do is get the 3 cities to all have similar policies, as well as the partner agencies such as the South Suburban Parks and Rec district, as well as the Arapahoe Libraries District, to really all kind of share common, guidance and guidelines on that. But right now, that is a separate conversation essentially from the cold weather sheltering. That Severe Weather Shelter Network, a nonprofit, has really been providing totally in our 3 communities.
Okay. And funding this, temporarily funding, short term, for a small dollar amount, this position will help add to that conversation and encourage the regional similarities in how we're addressing these issues?
That's a great question. I would turn to Deputy City Manager Dodd for that.
Yeah, sorry, Member Prang, I hope I got the question right. But yes, the seed money would essentially allow them to start planning for the winter season. It would be a collaborative effort. As City Manager Lewis mentioned, City of Littleton has already committed $5,000 as well. Obviously, there is kind of a wait and they're in kind of this really difficult situation where we don't know what the winter is going to hold. We don't know when it's going to start. Hopefully it holds off for a while. And they're hopeful that they're going to get the money from the county. But because they won't get it, if they do get it until mid-October, they really need to start planning now. We do hope that this will help to kind of seed, to use that term again, the collaboration between the cities, the county, and nonprofits that will also help us explore things for the summer. I just also wanted to quickly point out that Hat Forest right now, they're kind of unique in that they focus on people who normally cannot go into congregate housing. So people who are disabled, couples, people with children, animals, sometimes people who are literally discharged from the hospital that day. They're working on a model where they think they could actually share some of the hotel rooms to save on costs. But yes, that is their model. And so they would, the 40 people or so that Severe Weather Shelter Network helps on an event, and that's usually the max, they would be served by Hat Force under the same model of hotel vouchers. This is really a 1-year fix. After 1 year, we'd assess, and different nonprofits would see how they could engage in the future. But there may be opportunities, again, for congregate housing, like in churches and things that have been done in the past.
And I apologize that I said we expect an additional 40. I guess the total is 40 of all
Yeah,
clients.
it's an additional 40 on top of what Hat Force currently serves.
Got it.
Sorry, but the 40 is Severe Weather Shelter Network's current 40.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I think it's a really small risk that could provide a lot of benefit. So I would fully support funding the $5,000. I understand there's a question as to whether the county will come through with the monies or not, but I would rather us be prepared. And I appreciate the expanded scope of who potentially would be served. I think that there are a lot of overlooked groups of people that find themselves in emergent situations that they don't know what to do. So yeah, let's get a plan in place and be building on it. And if that ends up being a loss to us, but somehow we've got a plan in place and we know what we're doing until we figure it out fully and we save a life, that $5,000 is worth it for me.
City Manager Lewis, so I'm in favor of it. So they won't be utilizing the churches around Englewood for the first year?
That's correct. So Severe Weather Shelter Network had a congregate
Right.
model, but the Hat Force has a motel hotel voucher
Right.
program.
Okay. All right, Member Russell.
So Councilmember Noonan Camp suggested that they're ready to go right now. What is their plan? Who are they going to use?
I'm sorry, who's ready to go?
Hat Force.
Well, I don't know that they have conveyed that, and if I conveyed that, I apologize. What they're saying is they need to set up to be prepared because we're not sure who else would do this. And again, I knew that Movement 5280 was looking at this, but have not yet applied for it. So I think that those are our only two hopes at this point of having places for people to go in severe weather, cold this winter. And we're almost at September and we're all getting a little bit nervous that we don't have a plan in place. And if we don't start now, I'm not sure we'll be ready by October, November. But I do not believe Hat Force is ready to go now, but they have a model that they could translate into something for a larger population.
Thank you.
If I could just add to City Manager Lewis, they have already had initial conversations with RTD about transportation for additional people to and from motels. They've also had discussions with Integrated Family Services about providing shelf-stable meals to the additional people as well. So they have done some initial outreach and planning with some of their partners.
Member Noonan Camp.
Sure, I just want to clarify my comments. I'm not insinuating that they're ready to go now. They need funding to be able to be ready to go. I just mean that they are ready to be in a partnership with us, whereas other partners are not currently in that position. And I think if someone is ready to begin working with us to make sure we are ready for the winter season, that's a wise investment.
All right.
And Mayor, since we have three, that's a majority of this body, but
Right.
if you would rather us put this, if the clerk will allow it, put us on this on an agenda, we can do that. Certainly, we can also reach out to Movement 5280 about their plans. But because this is emergent and we think time is of the essence, that's why we brought it to
Member
you
Ward,
tonight.
you want to weigh in?
To spare the rigmarole and the bureaucratic nonsense, I'll be number 4.
All right. Thank you so much. City Manager Lewis, anything else?
That's it. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for this evening. We are now adjourned. It's 9:03. See everybody next week. Have a good night.